Chapter 683. Hey, your taxes here are too scary? Walking out of the tax bureau, Qili naturally held Jiang Hai's arm, and then said unhappily. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He couldn't deny it. The taxes in the United States were indeed too heavy. Just the federal tax alone is daunting enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai earns a lot more than that. Well, the wool comes from the sheep's back. I pay more money, so my status here is higher. Looking at Qili's pouting mouth, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai's words were completely correct. The biggest difference between the United States and Wuxia was the difference in social status. In the United States, it was a gold standard world. Rich people were everything. If you paid high taxes, you would naturally have a reputation in the local area. After all, the salary of the police was the money you paid in taxes. You, as a taxpayer, were quite a dazzling existence. Even when you accumulated wealth to a certain extent. Those in the ruling party or the opposition parties would come to rope you in, hoping to get political donations. Therefore, in the United States, as long as you didn't evade taxes, you would be the guest of honor of all the politicians. No one would dare to do anything to you. Just like Jiang Hai, although his relationship with the upper echelons of the United States was still zero in Winthrop, he was the local tyrant. Of course, the premise was that he paid all the taxes. In the United States, the most terrifying organization was not the FBI, CIA, etc., but the tax bureau. Countless tycoons and tycoons were imprisoned. The biggest crime was tax evasion. Jiang Hai's identity was Wuxia, so he was particularly careful in this regard. The taxes he paid every year were calculated by 3 accountants hired by Moses Adams. Except for the jewelry he sold, all of his normal income had been declared for tax, even the 1 million yuan from selling the fish. However, even though Jiang Hai was doing well here, if he were in Wuxia, he would still have to tuck his tail between his legs. This was because Wuxia's social status was based on official status. No matter how much money you had, it was useless. This was because your land belonged to the country. If the country wanted to take it back, it could be taken back. If some officials took a fancy to it and said they wanted to take it back, they could still take it back. At most, they would give you some compensation. However, no one knew how much of this compensation would be left. Moreover, in Wuxia, being an official was the best way out. No matter how rich a businessman was, he could not withstand a single word from an official. The deputy section chief who destroyed a family and the deputy section chief who exterminated a family was not a joke. Of course, existences above the hall level were not allowed to appear here. Jiang Hai didn't want to be sealed for no reason. Therefore, in the book, the highest rank that appeared was the division level. However, it was still very easy for a division-level official to deal with a billionaire. Well, just take it as easy. Anyway, Jiang Hai did not dare to return to China to develop. He was really afraid that when he woke up, his manner would become someone else's. This was the difference between the official status and the gold standard. The gold standard looked more red and cruel. It was like a pack of wolves. If you want to survive, you have to find food and eat other animals. When you become the strongest wolf in the pack, you will be the wolf king. The official status was like an official who was herding a flock of sheep. In his eyes, these sheep were treated equally. If he liked any of them, he would help them. However, they were still a flock of sheep. For the rich, the gold standard was much better than the official standard. At least they could ensure their own safety. However, for the ordinary people, the official standard was actually more conducive to governance. It was more stable and there would be fewer conflicts in society. This was what it meant to not worry about scarcity but about inequality. Well, Jiang Hai was a little off topic. However, now he was relieved because the biggest issue of the year was solved. Unknowingly, Qili had been with Jiang Hai for almost half a month. During this time, Jiang Hai and the others had been busy building the company, preparing the beef cattle to participate in the Texas All-American Beef Cattle Show, and dealing with the matters in the manner. Zheng Jin, who was recommended by Qili, was really good. She had learned a lot after being with Qili for so many years. Her fluent English made it easy for her to live here. In addition, with Jiang Hai's influence in Boston, at least Zhang Dihai and Moses Adams would definitely take care of her. Under such circumstances, Zheng Jin's efficiency was really high. It was as if the things in China didn't affect her. She set up the company, renovated the company, bought tables and chairs, met the employees, and so on. It could be said that Zheng Jin easily arranged these tasks in an orderly manner. After watching her for a week, he found that she was really good at this. Jiang Hai signed a contract with her. Jiang Hai hired her to be the CEO of the Tinglong Company. There were only 2 main categories of work: publicity and transportation. Publicity of the beef and seafood produced in Jiang Hai's Tinglong Manor. Transportation was responsible for passing these things through security and transporting them back to the capital of Wuxia to be handed over to Qili. She could also send them to the big cities in the United States, where there would naturally be people from the Shanghai supermarkets to receive them. She mainly paid for things like planes, flight routes and maintenance. She handled these quite well. As for her salary, Jiang Hai gave her $1 million a year. Although it wasn't particularly much, one could become a general manager in some domestic companies. $1 million a year was actually just a basic figure. After all, it was only $6 million and they had to pay taxes. But what was really valuable was the 10% dividend and the company's shares. Jiang Hai owned 100% of the company's shares, but she could enjoy 10% of the dividend. This was also her goal. According to her estimation, if the company did well, it was impossible for it to lose money. After all, most of the business had already been contracted out. So even if it didn't make money in a year, it would at least make a net profit of $30 to $40 million. 10% was $3 to $4 million. This was not a small sum for Zheng Jin. Whether it was for money or for Qili, she was quite serious about her work. Except for an accountant, Jiang Hai was too lazy to take care of everything else. In Jiang Hai's eyes, she was a complete professional. After handing over the company to Zheng Jin, Jiang Hai and the others put more effort into the manor. This half a month might be the happiest half a month for Qili since her father passed away. Because Jiang Hai would hug her to sleep every night. Although he would leave for a while at night, when she fell asleep, Jiang Hai was by her side. When she woke up, Jiang Hai was also by her side. Without the pressure of work, she played with Jiang Hai in the manor every day. They would go to see the cows, ride horses, plant vegetables in the greenhouse that had been built with Delina and the others, or go to the vineyard to talk to Aphrodite and the others about the ripening of the grapes. Then they would drink a glass of wine under the grapevines. If she was tired of playing on land, she could play in the sea. She could go fishing, catch fish, dive and catch lobsters. She could also ask Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan, who were almost mute here, to go shopping in Winthrop. To be honest, Qili really didn't want to leave anymore. She wanted to buy some native products or check out the seasonal clothes, but a phone call pulled her out of this idea. She could stay here, but she couldn't watch her father's company collapse or fall into the hands of others. This was the last thing she wanted to see. Because of this, after Qili accompanied Jiang Hai to pay his taxes, it was almost time for her to leave. But this time, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan wouldn't leave. This time, they were already mentally prepared to stay by Jiang Hai's side. If Qijia and Qiya came back, then there would be 7 people in Jiang Hai's villa. It seemed to be getting more and more lively. Recently, they had been learning English from Delina and Marian. Seeing their changes, Jiang Hai was also very happy. Time sometimes passed by unknowingly. In the blink of an eye, Qili had been in Jiang Hai's villa for 3 weeks. And today she was officially leaving. But when she came, there were 4 people, but when she left, she was the only one left. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan decided to stay in Jiang Hai's villa. They didn't want to go back, but at least they didn't want to leave now. Zheng Jin had become Jiang Hai's CEO and signed a 1-year work contract. The visa was also easily completed with the help of Jiang Hai. So this time she didn't want to leave. Qili also didn't want her to leave. After all, it was very troublesome to stay in China. You have to take care of yourself. Outside the departure hall of New York's Guilati Airport, Jiang Hai and Qili stood opposite each other. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Qili said with some worry. She didn't know when her heart had been completely tied to Jiang Hai. Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before saying, "You too, if you feel anything wrong, contact me immediately. I can go back to China or pick you up. Don't forget, I am still your husband." Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before saying, "Hey, you still know that you are my husband, but unfortunately my husband is a womanizer. I think you have eaten almost all of the women in your manor. In the beginning, you lied to me that you didn't have that kind of feeling for Aphrodite and the others. A rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its burrow? I think you have eaten all of them now." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Qili's face showed a trace of displeasure, her heart was already blooming with joy. Husband, these 2 words from Jiang Hai's mouth, it was really not an easy thing. But she still had to accept it and say what she should say. She didn't know how she could tolerate Jiang Hai having so many women. Maybe it was to make up for it or for something else, but Qili found that she really didn't care about these things. Compared to those women, she was more concerned about whether she could stay by Jiang Hai's side. This was more important. "I'm leaving. Don't miss me too much." Seeing that the plane had begun to check in, Qili knew that she had to leave. She glanced at Jiang Hai, took a deep breath, and then hugged Jiang Hai tightly. After kissing Jiang Hai's lips, she said in his ear. Then she picked up her luggage and left quickly. She didn't look back because she didn't know if she would be willing to leave if she looked back at Jiang Hai. Her life here with Jiang Hai and the people here with Jiang Hai were constantly destroying her strong woman side. She didn't know if she would have the ability to go back to the capital and be her own iron-blooded president after one look back. But in Qi Li's heart, a seed had been planted. It seemed that it was time for her to consider retirement. Once she found a trustworthy person and handed the company over to him, she would be able to look for Jiang Hai. This was a good thing. As he watched Qi Li's figure enter the airport, Jiang Hai's heart felt a little empty. In fact, even though Jiang Hai was living a good life here, he was actually a little lonely. He didn't lack friends. Everyone in Winthrop was his friend, but when these friends were linked to benefits, friendship was no longer as pure. Of course, this was only because Jiang Hai was busy. Jiang Hai didn't lack women either. Just like Qi Li said, Aphrodite and the others were indeed related to Jiang Hai. But their relationship was more of a superior and subordinate relationship, not like an equal boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. Ai Xiaoxi couldn't give him this, Feng Yunshin couldn't give him this, Prawalton couldn't give him this, and even Qi Jie and Qia couldn't give him the same feeling as Qi Li. Qi Li was Qi Li, Qi Jie was Qi Jie, Qia was Qia, and Ai Xiaoxi was Ai Xiaoxi. Every woman by Jiang Hai's side was unique and irreplaceable. If anyone left, he would feel a little empty in his heart. I'm still not strong enough. Sooner or later I'll have all my women by my side. Since I have the ability, if I don't start a harem, won't my efforts be in vain? With a self-deprecating smile, Jiang Hai, who had always thought of himself as a salted fish with no dreams, had his first dream sprouted because of Qi Li. It could also be said that it was an ambition. Although this ambition was not serious, it was more or less considered a main line. After sorting out his emotions, Jiang Hai drove back to the manor. The next day he had to go to Boston. After Qi Li left, Qi Jie and Qia would be coming back. They had already settled the matters in Miami. The huge White Research Institute had been sold by Qi Jie. Anyway, Qia's illness had been completely cured, and they would officially return tomorrow. However, Jiang Hai couldn't stay with them for too long because he had to leave soon. This time his target was Texas. Chapter 684. Sir? Sir? The plane will land in half an hour. Please hurry up. In a dual-use plane, a pretty stewardess stood outside the bathroom door with a blushing face. She knocked on the door while speaking to the person inside. Perhaps the stewardess heard her voice. After a few minutes, the bathroom door opened. Jiang Hai walked out of the room with Cheryl Li, who could no longer stand on her own. Under the shy gaze of the stewardess, he walked back to his seat and put Cheryl next to him. After fastening her seat belt, Cheryl leaned on Jiang Hai's shoulder as usual. She allowed Jiang Hai's hand to reach into her clothes and change certain parts of her body into various shapes. Hey, we're still on the plane. Can you be more careful? Looking at Jiang Hai and Cheryl Li sitting next to her, Prawalton put down the fashion magazine in her hand and said impatiently, "It's really interesting in the sky. I haven't tried it before. Shall we try it too?" Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai smiled, stretched out his long arm and pulled Prawalton into his arms. His hand had unknowingly touched her lower abdomen and reached into her clothes. After struggling for a while, she realized that she couldn't break free. Prawalton gave up and let Jiang Hai's big hand reach into her pants. Feeling that her clothes were completely wet, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. However, Prawalton didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, she continued to read the magazine. "I won't go with you. If you want to go, let's talk about it after we get off the plane." Ignoring Jiang Hai's gaze and actions, Prawalton said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This woman is really cute. Sister Prawalton has been afraid of heights since the past. She is also afraid of flying. I've known her for so many years, and she never unfastens her seat belt on the plane. Listening to Prawalton's words, Cheryl Li whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Playing in the air was actually proposed by her because they watched a movie about stewardesses in Jiang Hai's house a while ago. She felt that it might be good to play in the air, so she tried it today. Unexpectedly, in that narrow bathroom, there was indeed an indescribable feeling. There was no way to stretch out their body and they couldn't even take off their clothes. They could only pull their underwear to the side, but it was a different feeling. Of course, the premise was that there was no one else on the plane. They took off from Boston to San Antonio. In just a few hours they went to the bathroom 3 times, which showed how addicted they were. Prawalton had been sitting there reading a magazine. But looking at the magazine that she hadn't finished for a few hours, one could tell that her heart wasn't that calm. Glancing at Jiang Hai and Cheryl, Prawalton wrinkled her nose at them. When they landed on the ground, she will definitely let Jiang Hai, maybe let Jiang Hai know why the flowers are so red. After all, Jiang Hai is indeed talented in that aspect. However, it's not a problem to let Cheryl know the consequences of offending her. As the three of them chatted, laughed, and hugged each other, the plane was about to land at San Antonio's airport. Today was April 3rd. There were still 3 days before the Texas All-American Beef Show, but the venue was already set up. After getting the exact information, Prawalton used the plane dedicated to Sam's Club to take Jiang Hai and his cattle to Texas. This plane was a huge plane, an Airbus A380. The whole plane was changed into 2 parts, the cargo cabin and the cabin. There were only 10 seats in the cabin, and all of them were better than the first-class seats. The seats could be adjusted 180 degrees and could be used as a bed directly. Moreover, it was very wide and the seats could be moved left and right. In addition to the decoration here, it was very luxurious. To be honest, Jiang Hai had some thoughts of buying such a plane. If he took such a plane back to China, it would be very comfortable. But the premise was that the money he spent was also very comfortable. Although the cargo cabin at the back was called a cargo cabin, it was actually not bad. At least the seats were comparable to those in the first-class cabin. This time, Jiang Hai came to participate in the competition to make a name for himself, not to open up a market. Therefore, he learned a lesson from last time and only brought 3 cows this time. However, these 3 cows were all carefully raised by him this month. These 3 cows were all left over from last year. They were fat and strong and full of spirituality. Of course, this so-called spirituality was not related to intelligence. It's just that these cows look very smart, that's all. As for the 3 cows, Jiang Hai also brought 3 cowboys with him. They were Robbins Garcia, Burke Dollar, and Bell Lester. Originally, Philemon Turner should have come, but considering Jiang Hai's safety outside, he specially sent Bell Lester this time. Of course, there was also a professional bodyguard, Knerson Peters. Athena Vesborio did not come because the manor still needed to be protected. At this time, the 4 big men were sitting in the cargo cabin. As for the passenger cabin, only Jiang Hai and the other 2 were there. Naturally, Jiang Hai could do whatever he wanted and these 2 would cooperate with him very well. As the tires came into contact with the ground, the huge plane couldn't help but shake. Robbins Garcia and the rest who were already prepared waited for the plane to slowly stabilize before they immediately walked into the cow enclosure to calm the cows who were a little panicked due to the tremors. The good thing about cows was that they were very quick to calm down. Soon the 3 cows calmed down. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. The airport had already prepared a car for the cows, which was parked behind the plane. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. After helping to put the cows into the car, they left the airport through the cargo passage. Jiang Hai and the others also left in the car prepared by Prawalton. Their goal was the venue this time. Although they could stay in a better hotel, don't forget that Jiang Hai had to stay with the cows. Prawalton and Cheryl had to stay with Jiang Hai. If they came to San Antonio, they would have a chance to be alone with Jiang Hai. If they went to another hotel to stay, it would be a waste, especially since Prawalton had tortured her along the way. When they arrived at the venue, Jiang Hai and the others showed their registration information. Then the people here arranged a place for them to graze the cows and an exhibition hall. After that, Jiang Hai and the others went to a hotel prepared by the organizers. Although it was only a 4-star hotel, it was still very good. Jiang Hai spent a lot of money, so the location of his exhibition hall was good. The room he stayed in was also a suite. After entering the room with Prawalton and Cheryl, Prawalton pushed Jiang Hai onto the bed. It was obvious what they wanted to do. It was afternoon when they arrived, but when Jiang Hai and the others came out, it was already night. According to Jiang Hai, they were going to find something to eat, but Robbins Garcia and the others were unwilling to leave. After all, the exhibition was coming soon. The cows were also very important, so only 4 people went out in the end. Jiang Hai, Prawalton, Cheryl Lee, and Jiang Hai's bodyguard, Knerson Peters. It was easy for the 4 of them to go out. Jiang Hai rented an SUV and drove to the distant holy city, San Antonio. In fact, for people in China, there had always been a misunderstanding about San Antonio. It was mainly for the NBA. This was because people in the NBA always said that San Antonio was a small city. The basketball market was small and there was no economy. In the eyes of people in China, San Antonio might not be as big as Boston, Atlanta, or Oakland. But in fact, this was all nonsense. San Antonio was a big city in the United States. It was quite a big city. Texas was the largest state in the United States besides Alaska. The largest city in Texas, Houston, was the fourth largest city in the United States. As for the holy city, San Antonio, it was the second largest city in Texas and the seventh largest city in the United States. Other than New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston, San Antonio was actually not afraid of anyone. Philadelphia, the sixth largest city, and Phoenix, the fifth largest city, were actually on par with San Antonio. Boston. If it was a metropolitan area, then San Antonio was far behind. However, they were talking about cities and they were using cities as a unit. Boston's urban area alone was not comparable at all. San Antonio's history could be said to be very long. It was the earliest Native American settlement in the United States. In 1691, Spanish explorers settled here. In the middle of the 18th century, it developed into the largest Native American settlement in Texas. In the middle of the 19th century, Texas and Mexico fought, including the Battle of the Alamo. At that time, the fight was very tragic. Mexico was very strong at that time. Texas was defeated, but later the Americans stood up. After Wu took over the territory of Texas, the Mexican-American War started. The United States annexed Texas and then there was the Civil War. This place became a famous cattle trading center and border city in the United States. To be honest, this city had a long history, but there were not many places that attracted people. There were only two reasons. One was the architecture of the Japanese people. After all, it was occupied by the Spanish in the beginning, so a large number of Spanish-style buildings were preserved. Later it was occupied by Mexico and many Mexican buildings were preserved here. There were very few American buildings here. However, there were many such exotic buildings. Second, the Holy River, which the people of San Antonio were proud of. The banks of the river were green and could be said to be world famous. Around the river there were restaurants, hotels, cafes, tourist souvenir shops, theaters, museums, and other buildings. However, all the buildings mentioned above were located in the river valley, which was lower than the city's street level. In other words, looking from the city, one could only see the river valley full of trees, but there were no traces of people. It was quite spectacular and it gave people a strange feeling when they walked in. Besides these two things, there was nothing else to see. Second, the recruitment mainly depended on the humanities. The Texas Folk Festival, beef show, rodeo competition, and so on. Every year, the San Antonio Livestock Show and rodeo competition were held here, but it was in February and lasted for 3 consecutive weeks. In February, Jiang Hai was at home, so naturally he could not come. This time, Jiang Hai participated in the livestock show held in Texas. Compared to the one held in San Antonio, the one in Texas was more popular. It was open to the whole country and lasted for a week. There were 2 kinds of competitions, the cattle competition and the rodeo competition. Both competitions started on the first day, then went through 3 days of auditions. On the 4th day, the top 16 were decided. On the 5th day, the top 8 were decided. On the 6th day, the top 4 were decided. On the 7th day, the best cattle and the best rodeo were decided. Compared to the voting in New York, a team of experts was formed here. They went into the exhibition hall to look at the cattle and score them. Therefore, there was no need to set up a TV and hang ribbons like in New York. It was very troublesome. Jiang Hai and the others came here mainly to get cattle. They did not care too much about rodeo. Robbins Garcia and Burke Dollar came here to compete when they were young. They had won honors, so they could not participate again. As for Bell Lester, it was not that the 2 old guys wanted to criticize him, but with his current ability, it was impossible for him to pass the auditions in such a competition. One was from Texas and the other was from Montana. The rodeos in these 2 places relied on these things to make a living. Therefore, when it came to picking up sheep, riding cattle, training horses, and so on, Bell Lester was at least 10 times better. Therefore, from the beginning, Jiang Hai's goal was the beef show, not the rodeo competition. Of course, it was still a bit early to say this. After all, they had to wait 3 days. Jiang Hai, Prawalton, Cheryl Lee, and Knerson Peters went straight into the city of San Antonio. Chapter 685. Hi boss. Give us 4 steaks. Hurry up. The game is about to start. We still have to drive there. The 4 people who walked in were probably 4 fans. They didn't look very old. They were about 30 years old. They were wearing the Spurs black jerseys. They shouted loudly as they walked in. Jiang Hai looked at them when he heard their shouts. The 4 of them walked to a table and began to discuss tonight's match. Is there a Spurs game tonight? Jiang Hai didn't pay much attention to NBA games. Although he would watch it sometimes, most of the time he preferred to watch American TV series and variety shows. For example, there was a famous American TV series called Slave of Desire and another one called Spartacus. They were all very good American TV series. There were no scenes that went against the socialist ideology. They were American TV series that anyone from 99 years old to people who had just learned how to walk could watch. Moreover, they were filmed quite well. However, he used to like basketball, so when he saw these people talking about the Spurs, Jiang Hai's interest was piqued. Of course, boss. Tonight is the regular season game between the Spurs and the Raptors. San Antonio will win. A white man turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai. He might have heard Jiang Hai's words. After hearing his words, many people in the restaurant started shouting. It could be seen that the Spurs had an unusually high reputation in the local area. Actually, this was understandable. Ever since the Spurs were established, they had won a total of 5 championships. Especially after 1998, they had never disappointed anyone. After choosing Duncan, they won the championship in 1999. In 2003, they defeated the Lakers, who were at their peak, and won the championship. In 2005, they defeated the Pistons, who had just eliminated the Lakers' F4 powerhouse, and in 2007, they defeated LeBron James, who was at his peak. After that, they entered the playoffs every year and slowly changed. In 2013 and 2014, they entered the finals in a row, and with a bunch of old arms and legs, they defeated the Big Three Miami Heat. At the same time, they were now one of the top teams in the league. When Jiang Hai first started watching basketball, it was because of Yao Ming of the Rockets. Later, his favorite team was the Phoenix Suns. The way the Suns played was very popular. However, during the 2 years when the Suns were at their peak, they were defeated by the Spurs. At that time, Jiang Hai didn't like the Spurs. He felt that the Spurs were a boring team. After pinning the other team to the ground, they didn't let the other team fight back. It was very difficult for him to like the Spurs. However, in recent years, Jiang Hai had become a fan of the Spurs. That smooth attack, that valiant fighting style, was indeed very likable, and so was Jiang Hai. Usually he would just watch the Spurs play at home. Now that he was in San Antonio, he wanted to go and watch the game live. Therefore, he looked at Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. He wanted to ask for their opinions. Although I don't know much, if you want to go, we'll go. After looking at each other, Cheryl's gaze landed on Prawalton. Her meaning was to let Prawalton do as she pleased. Prawalton thought for a while. Indeed, other than going back to roll in the sheets, she didn't have any other activities at night. She had just done it in the afternoon and was still in a happy state. If Jiang Hai wanted to go and watch, then she would accompany him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but cheer softly. Then he took out his phone and prepared to buy tickets. The Spurs had a lot of fans and they were all die-hard fans. The team's results were good and they entered the playoffs every year. Therefore, the loss of fans was relatively small. In addition, the team's playing style had become more and more beautiful in recent years, so the number of fans had increased. However, the football market here wasn't particularly popular. Other than key games and the playoffs, it was difficult to fill the seats with fans. Basically, it wasn't too difficult to buy tickets at any time. It was just a matter of location. Jiang Hai wanted to buy tickets in the front row, so he naturally didn't choose to sit too far behind. Therefore, he chose to sit in the first row, not far behind the Spurs bench. Naturally, the tickets weren't cheap at such a close position. The Spurs' results were there for all to see. His tickets couldn't be as cheap as those of the Bucks. After buying 4 tickets next to each other, Jiang Hai and the others sped up their eating. After eating, they prepared to leave directly. However, just as they were about to leave the shop, a group of people walked in from outside. Compared to the group of fans just now, these people were obviously the so-called successful people. They were all wearing suits and ties. The person in front kept smiling as he led the way. As he walked, he introduced the riverside. Originally, the two sides didn't know each other, so it was fine if they just walked past each other. However, the problem was that the entrance of the shop wasn't very big. The large group of people didn't seem to have any intention of lining up. They just squeezed their way in. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai, who was originally very anxious, couldn't help but frown. However, he didn't say anything. After all, this wasn't Winthrop. It wasn't his territory. For a small matter like this, it would be fine if he just let it pass. It would show that he was a person of high standards. However, if things were to pass so easily, there wouldn't be a need to describe it in detail. Among the crowd, most people's eyes were originally focused on this shop, but some people's eyes were looking at something else. For example, Cheryl Lee and Prawalton beside Jiang Hai. Ordinary men naturally have evil intentions but don't have the guts to do it. After all, they have male companions beside them. However, some people didn't care about this. So a well-dressed white man who looked about 30 years old came over with a smile. He wanted to walk in front of Prawalton, but Jiang Hai wouldn't give him such a chance. He directly blocked in front of Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. The man couldn't help but frown. However, he still didn't stop. He glanced at Jiang Hai's physique and smiled disdainfully. He was about to push Jiang Hai away. But the moment their shoulders collided, the man's face couldn't help but change. He really didn't expect Jiang Hai's strength to be so strong. Under this collision, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, and then his body unconsciously turned back. "Why did you bump into me?" This man really knows how to complain first. After being pushed away, he instantly covered his shoulder and looked at Jiang Hai angrily and shouted loudly. Hearing his words, the people who originally walked in were stunned for a moment, then walked to the man's side. Seeing the crowd gathering, Jiang Hai chuckled. "Want to fight?" He wasn't afraid of anyone when he fought. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to warm up, Connerson Peters stood up and came in front of them. "Step back, don't come close." At the sight of Connerson's powerful figure, those people who had gathered around were all startled. After exchanging glances with each other, they all took a step back. Actually, their relationship was not as solid as they had imagined. They just needed to support each other. However, there was no need for them to confront this burly man head-on. Given his size, it was obviously not a good idea to find trouble with him. "Hey, you're not allowed to make trouble here. Otherwise I'll call the police." At this time, the owner of this restaurant, or rather the waiter, also came over, but he didn't mean to stir up trouble. Generally, when there was a conflict in China, the owner would come out to stop the fight and say something like, "We're all here to have fun. You don't have to do this." Or, "Give me some face, don't start a conflict here." Everyone put out the fire, but the American owner was arrogant. If he didn't agree with a word, he would call the police. He wasn't afraid that these people would really fight. Hearing this person's words, the people here pretended to be angry and then completely retreated. What a joke. They didn't intend to fight. What a joke. If they were injured, it would be too much of a loss. And although the man didn't seem to be dressed well, he was obviously someone who didn't lack money since he could go out with a bodyguard. "What's the matter? Jiang Hai, why are you here?" Seeing that the crowd had retreated, a person who came in first ran into the circle, wanting to be a peacemaker. But when he just walked in and saw Jiang Hai in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned. When Jiang Hai saw him, he was also a little surprised because he knew this person, Rosalind Cartwright, one of Jiang Hai's competitors last year. He came from the Cartwright Animal Husbandry Company. In the beginning, a man named Paul K. went to Jiang Hai's manor to pull cattle, and there was some hatred between the two sides. Later, at the beef show in New York State, this guy made a bet with Jiang Hai. As a result, he was beaten black and blue by Jiang Hai. If it was normal times, Jiang Hai probably wouldn't remember him, but it was different here. Jiang Hai just said that he was going to attend the beef show and just remembered him. He didn't expect to meet him here. It was really fate. "Why are you here? Has your position been restored?" Looking at Rosalind Cartwright, who was walking in front of him, Jiang Hai crossed his arms and said disdainfully. He clearly remembered that after this guy lost to him last year, he was directly fired by his family's company. Now it seems that he is worthy of being his son. In just a year, he has been restored to his position. Ahem, you don't need to worry about that. What? The New York Beef Show can't satisfy you anymore, so now you're eyeing the National Beef Show? Let me tell you, the National Beef Show is not as easy as the New York Beef Show. There are more strong people here than you think. Hearing Jiang Hai mention last year's incident, Rosalind Cartwright's face couldn't help but change, and he said gloomily. He thought about it and figured out the purpose of Jiang Hai's coming here. It was nothing more than the same as his, to attend the National Beef Show. Thinking of this, his gloomy face became even gloomier. Originally, the Cartwright Company's business didn't cover the territory outside the northeast corner of the United States, so they didn't care about the National Beef Show. First, they couldn't beat it. Second, it was because the beef that they carefully prepared might not be able to cover the market after the competition. At that time, it would be a waste. In addition, the competition here was too fierce. Therefore, in their opinion, it was better to take over the New York Beef Show than to waste time on the National Beef Show in Texas. But who would have thought that Jiang Hai would come out last year and completely ruin their wishful thinking? The reason why he didn't attend the New York Beef Show this year, but came to Texas to attend the livestock show in Texas, was to avoid meeting Jiang Hai again. But he didn't expect to meet Jiang Hai here. Needless to say, he knew what he was here for. It must be for the National Beef Show. Thinking of Jiang Hai's beef, he couldn't help but have a headache. This time it might be really troublesome. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He was quite confident in his beef. "I hope you can get a good result. Let's go." Glancing at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, Rosalind Cartwright took a deep breath and left with the others. Seeing them leave, Jiang Hai and the others also left. They still had to watch the competition. Do you know this group of people? That girl seems pretty good. After Jiang Hai and the others left, the person who had the conflict just now couldn't help but walk over, covering his shoulder. He looked at Rosalind Cartwright and said, "Don't give up. Just give up." That guy. Well, it's nothing. That guy raises cattle in Boston, Massachusetts. He's a small manor owner. The quality of the beef he raises is pretty good. He's probably here to participate in this event. After hearing this person's words, Rosalind wanted to tell him to give up. Jiang Hai was very powerful in Massachusetts, and he had a lot of personal property. Something happened to him, he would be finished. But when he was about to say it, he suddenly changed his mind. If this guy wants to find trouble with Jiang Hai, then let him go. If he succeeds, then Jiang Hai's trip will be in vain. If he can't find her, then Jiang Hai will deal with him. It has nothing to do with him, and he will have one less competitor. Why not? Hearing Rosalind Cartwright's words, the man couldn't help but touch his chin. This guy was a pervert. When he saw Prawalton, it was impossible for him not to be tempted. Although she was taken, he could use her to loosen the soil. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't care at all. He was just a manor owner. How much money could he have? What power could he have? Just give him some channels and he would be happy. Thinking of this guy was even more certain that he wanted that beauty. Chapter 686. Do you have a grudge against the Cartwright Company? Prawalton, who was lying on Jiang Hai's chest, forced herself to calm down. She asked Jiang Hai with her eyes half closed. Jiang Hai hugged her with one hand and Cheryl Lee with the other. He took 2 deep breaths to stabilize his unstable breathing. Then he began to recall. Let's talk about this. Cartwright, the Cartwright Company is a big company in the Cartwright Company. Back then, my cowboys wanted to sell their cattle to this company. Actually, you can't blame them because they didn't know how much my cattle were worth. The people sent by this company were very arrogant. At that time, I made a bet with them to see if I could get first place in the New York State Livestock Exhibition. You know the result. Because of this bet, the company lost a lot of money. So we have a grudge. Jiang Hai smiled as he looked at Prawalton. Oh, is that so? This is a normal competition. Don't worry about them. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton closed her eyes and found a comfortable position on Jiang Hai's shoulder like a kitten. Then she leaned against him and got ready to sleep. Jiang Hai also got ready to sleep with them in his arms. After leaving the restaurant, Jiang Hai didn't know what those people said. He went to the Spurs' home stadium and watched the Spurs games. He had to admit that the current Spurs were indeed one of the strongest teams in the league. Even the Fierce Dragons, one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, were beaten by them. However, looking at the current Spurs, Jiang Hai still felt that there was a problem. That was because the Spurs lacked a true offensive all-star in their current lineup. In other words, no matter how tight the opponent's defense was, he could still score. In the past, Duncan was such a person. No matter who was guarding against him, there was no way to deal with him. However, things were different now. Aldridge's offense as the core of the 2 Dirks was not very stable. His shooting ability was still quite good against the short players inside the 3-point line, but against those muscle-bound players, his offensive ability was indeed a little weak. He was not bad at playing the 4th position, but he was still a little lacking at the 5th position. Small forward Kawhi Leonard's defense was one of the best in the league, but his offense, especially when it came to attacking with the ball, was still far from good. His hit rate for a back solo was also not particularly high, and there was still room for improvement. From Jiang Hai's perspective as a fake fan, the Spurs were a strong team. However, they were not at the level of a champion. However, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After watching the game, they returned to the hotel. Of course, after returning, Connors and Peters went to eat some supper before returning to rest together. After returning to the room, Jiang Hai, Prawalton, and Cheryl Lee naturally had another meal. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person. If he was, he would have been done for a long time. Sometimes, Jiang Hai thought that monogamy was not only a matter of women's rights, but also to protect men and let them live a little longer. Hugging Prawalton and Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai slowly fell asleep. The hotel was originally built in the suburbs, and it was a 4-star hotel. The soundproofing was very good. There was no other sound throughout the night, and Jiang Hai and the others had a good night's sleep. The next morning they came out of the room at 9 o'clock. After washing up, they went to the hotel lobby to have breakfast. Breakfast here was included in the accommodation. Although the organizers provided accommodation, they did not provide lunch, dinner, or supper. Only breakfast was eaten as a buffet. In fact, it was called a buffet, but there was a lot of food. There were sandwiches, baked bread, and a lot of other ingredients. You could take whatever you wanted. There was fresh milk, fried eggs, sausages, ham, bacon, and fresh lettuce, kale, and other vegetables. In addition to Western food, there were also Chinese food such as various kinds of rice porridge, soy milk, Mexican burritos, and so on. It could be said that this hotel prepared breakfast for people all over the world. As long as you wanted to eat, there was food here. Among Jiang Hai's group of 6, Robbins Garcia got up very early and went straight to the cowshed. After all, there wasn't much time left until the start of the competition. Therefore, the cowshed couldn't be left unguarded. In case someone was up to no good, or if there was an accident, they wouldn't have enough time to transfer more beef cattle from the manor. Therefore, there must be someone guarding the cowshed even at night. Last night, it was Burke Dollar for the first half of the night, and Belle Lester for the second half. This morning, Robbins Garcia went to replace him. Therefore, when Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the restaurant, they found that there were a lot of people eating breakfast. Most of them were dressed in standard cowboy attire. At the same time, there were also some who wore suits and ties. These were the representatives or bosses of the livestock companies. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai didn't care about them. He found an empty seat and let Pra Walton and Cheryl Lee occupy it. Then Jiang Hai and the others went to get food. However, when he just came back with food, the scene in front of him made Jiang Hai laugh. It's really melodramatic. Looking at his table in the distance, Jiang Hai lowered his head and smiled. Boss, do you need me to send them away? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Connerson Peters also noticed the distance. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and whispered to Jiang Hai. Looking at the fierce light in his eyes, Jiang Hai waved his hand and stopped him. Let's take a look first. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he walked back to his table with the food, but at this time, there was a guy sitting next to Prawalton. Jiang Hai also saw this guy last night. It was the guy who bumped into him. At this time, this man was sitting next to Prawalton talking about something, but Prawalton's face was still cold. Except for Jiang Hai, she has always had this expression towards other men, but this person didn't seem to care. Hey, you are sitting in the wrong place. Putting the food on the table, Jiang Hai pointed to the man's position and said with narrowed eyes. But the man just glanced at Jiang Hai, then turned his head and continued to talk nonsense. For example, he has a manor in Montana, how beautiful it is, he has a villa in California next to the sea, he also has a yacht, he can sail Prawalton and so on. Listening to him talking nonsense, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Oh, sorry, it seems that this gentleman is deaf, let's go somewhere else. Jiang Hai looked at the man, shrugged, picked up the food and winked at Prawalton. Everyone was about to leave. Seeing that the beauty in front of him was about to leave, the man had no choice but to ignore Jiang Hai. He turned around and looked at Jiang Hai arrogantly. Are you blind? Can't you see that I am chatting with this lady? If you are blind, I suggest you go to the ophthalmology department. Don't do these disgusting things. Looking at Jiang Hai, the man turned his butt and said slowly. This gentleman doesn't seem to be deaf, then it seems that there is something wrong with your brain. Didn't you hear me say that there is someone here? Staring at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled. He looked at him with disdain and said, this guy really thinks he's something. Is this seat yours? Do you think there is someone here just because you say so? I also said that this place is mine. Boy, you better watch your mouth. A nouveau riche from Boston dares to pretend in our Texas. Believe it or not, you won't be able to walk out of Texas in one piece. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man smiled disdainfully, then looked at Jiang Hai with an arrogant face. I said, the place I hate the most is Texas. There are too many dogs here and they don't understand human language. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was not angry, but looked at Prawalton, waved at her, and then said with a smile. Now that the dog is barking at you, what are you going to do? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton couldn't help but pick up a piece of bread with a smile, tore off a piece and put it in her mouth and chewed gently, while chuckling at Jiang Hai. You dare to call me a dog? Listening to Jiang Hai and Prawalton echoing each other, the man's eyes widened and he said with an angry face. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai and Prawalton ignored him. I'm a dog lover. If a dog barks at me, I should kill it, but today I'm in a good mood, so I'm just going to drive it away. With his head lowered, Jiang Hai said softly, and when his voice fell, his hand also put on the man's shoulder. You want to? Feeling Jiang Hai's action, the man couldn't help but panic a little. He knew that Jiang Hai's physical fitness was not comparable to his, so he wanted to say something, but before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai's right arm instantly exerted force. He directly threw the man out. Yes, threw him out. He flew directly from the chair almost 2 meters high and fell heavily on the carpet in the distance. Then Jiang Hai slowly sat down in front of him. Ah, my arm. My arm. My arm. You bastard. You bastard. Ah, my arm, it hurts, you bastard, how dare you hit me? Security, where are the security guards? If I get hit, there won't be anyone, you bastard, who the F***ck eat? This fall, although it wouldn't hurt him, it was inevitable that it would hurt. When he landed, the man hit his body with his hand, which made his arm hurt, but he still had a lot of energy. After he stood up with his arm, he shouted loudly. Hearing his shout, many security guards in the distance rushed over. Looking at his appearance, plus Jiang Hai's appearance, it was not difficult to see that this should be a conflict between the guests. Originally, Jiang Hai was still thinking whether there would be some kind of melodramatic thing, but he didn't expect that the people in this hotel were quite neutral. After looking at the situation, they didn't come over to say anything melodramatic, nor did they stand up for this man. They just walked in front of this man and asked if he needed to call the police or an ambulance. Their meaning was obvious. They were not going to stand up for him and find trouble with Jiang Hai. Hearing the words of these security guards, the man's face turned purple. Jiang Hai and the others sat in the distance, but they couldn't help but laugh. This guy seems to be sick and very sick. This disease is called the protagonist disease. He always thinks that the world should revolve around him. As long as others are disrespectful to him or have a trace of neutrality, he will jump out and say that he has suffered unfair treatment. Now, seeing that these security guards didn't stand up for him, he couldn't help but jump up and curse. But he only moved his mouth, he didn't dare to do anything, and if he called the police wouldn't care. Just the fact that he harassed the other party first, Prawalton could sue him, and it was uncertain who would win at that time. He had to admit that the United States had a strong sense of law. Even if he had called the police, nothing would have happened. This guy just said a few harsh words and left. Looking at his back, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. There are really a lot of crazy dogs. Young man, you may have to be careful. At this time, after the people at the next table finished eating, a yellow man in his 40s walked to Jiang Hai's table and looked at Jiang Hai in a friendly manner. Oh, hello, what should I be careful of? Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but immediately reply, then asked him. The person you just kicked out is called Roland Schalater, the heir of the SSR company. His family has a high status in the Texas livestock industry. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man said to Jiang Hai, at least he has to let Jiang Hai know who he offended. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at Prawalton in confusion. He has never heard of the SSR company. Texas Animal Husbandry Company. We have dealt with this company before. It is indeed one of the largest companies in Texas. The first S stands for State of Texas, and the last SR stands for stock farming. Its market value is estimated to be around $2 billion. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Prawalton's brain flashed, and he already found the company's situation. Chapter 687. More than 2 billion? Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai touched his chin and smiled. Animal husbandry companies worth more than 2 billion yuan? In fact, on a global scale, it was definitely not a small company. This was talking about the market value, not the total value. If he wants to acquire it, the price will inevitably be higher, about 3 billion. In the world, there were only a few companies in animal husbandry that could reach millions of dollars. Among them, the well-deserved giant in the United States was the Cargill Group. Other than that, there was no existence that Jiang Hai couldn't move. A small company with a market value of more than 2 billion can't even compare to Jiang Hai. What can Jiang Hai be afraid of them? Thank you very much, I will take care of his affairs. Since he is not afraid in his heart, he is in the medical team. Only by knowing the enemy and yourself can you win 100 battles. Jiang Hai is not a person who takes advantage of others. Since this person helped him, Jiang Hai still has to thank him. You're welcome. I see your skin color. You are Asian, right? Looking at Jiang Hai, the middle-aged man also smiled and said to him, well, yes, I am from Wuxia. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai answered the question. In fact, he was also a little curious. I feel like you are from Wuxia. My name is Lu Leking and I am also from Wuxia. Now I run a ranch in Texas. This is my wife Wuxia Lu and this is my son Lu Rongshuan. Hearing that Jiang Hai is also from Wuxia, the middle-aged man here couldn't help but smile. Then he introduced the two people behind him, a very typical white woman about the same age as Lu Leking. There is also a mixed-race boy who looks to be in his teens. At this time he is looking at Jiang Hai timidly. Hello brother, did you settle down here? After greeting them, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at Lu Leking. Yeah, it's not easy to make a living in China. I studied here when I was in university. After I graduated, I considered going back to China to work, but the working environment in China wasn't very good. So I took the 200,000 that my dad was going to give me to find a job and came to the place where I studied. I bought a piece of land and started working as a farmer. How should I put it? At least it's more comfortable than working in China. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Lu Leking couldn't help but smile. But don't look at how happy he is. But Jiang Hai knew that 200,000 renminbi from 10 years ago was still worth a lot of money. At that time he might not be able to buy a house in Beijing, but he could at least buy a good house in Bing City. He could even use 200,000 renminbi to invest overseas. He had to admit that Lu Leking was daring. Brother, you are really bold. Hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Haha, it's not like what you said. Actually, the reason why I came here is because I studied here when I was in university, so I am not unfamiliar with this place. But little brother, are you also participating in the beef cattle exhibition? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lu Leking couldn't help but smile. Although he didn't think that he was great, being able to gain recognition was a good feeling. Yes, I am also a farmer, but my home is in Winthrop. If you have time you can come to my place to play. My place is near the sea. Listening to Lu Leking's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Okay, when I have time. Hearing Jiang Hai's invitation, Lu Leking couldn't help but smile and said. In fact, these words were almost the same as not saying anything. In China, when I have time, I will wait for the next time and I will wait for a while. These words were basically excuses. When I have time. When will I have time? Wait for the next time, when will the next time be? So when they say this, they are just being polite, but it is different in the United States, they will take it seriously. So after hearing the words of his father and Jiang Hai, Lu Leking didn't have any thoughts, but his wife and son's eyes lit up. To them, being able to go out and play was a very good thing. After saying goodbye to Lu Leking's family, Jiang Hai also went back to prepare. They were going to the cowshed to take a look. Although the cows were sent to the cowshed last night, Jiang Hai didn't look at the environment there carefully. Now that it is dawn, everyone can't sleep during the day, so naturally they have to go and take a look. As for Prawalton, she left first. Because she also has her own things to do. As the manager of Sam's Club, she not only has to give advice to Jiang Hai, but also her own business. She also had to think about her own store. Therefore, since she came to the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, not only did she have to help the Soaring Dragon Manor make a name for herself, but she also had to choose a channel to sell the meat. After all, Jiang Hai's manor only produced 10,000 cows a year. A cow weighs more than 400 kilograms of beef. That's more than 8 million pounds of beef. That's all. If it was distributed to the entire United States, it wouldn't even be enough for everyone in the United States to eat. Of course, this is just a saying. Jiang Hai's beef is not for ordinary people to eat. But for those rich people, 365 days a year wasn't enough. Therefore, Sam's Club still needed to purchase some other types of beef. Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor had high-end beef, but they also needed some mid-range beef. As for the low-end beef, they didn't need it. They could directly go to Walmart to buy it. Because of her work, she had to go to the local area to recruit her staff, and then come to Jiang Hai's place in the evening. Now Prawalton may have been holding back for too long, it is time for her to taste. She is extremely infatuated with Jiang Hai. Cheryl Lee is also quite infatuated with Jiang Hai, not to mention Prawalton. After separating from the two women, Jiang Hai also drove the car and took Knerson Peters to the cowshed. After all, there are only 3 cowboys this time, and they are divided into 3 shifts. In that case, the people will be exhausted, so Jiang Hai must come to replace them. When he arrived here, Robbins Garcia is standing in front of their 3 cows busy. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, he can't help but smile and wave, indicating his position. Jiang Hai walked over while looking at the nearby situation. He has to admit that this National Animal Husbandry Exhibition is quite good. The cowshed was completely separated from each other. It should be that when the cowshed was built, they had already considered the number of cattle each family had. Some families came here to discuss business, so they had more cattle. Because of this, their location was more remote and occupied a larger area. Some came to win awards such as Jiang Hai. Their cows are relatively small, but they are very good. The cowshed they occupy is relatively small, but the facilities are better. For example, the shed where Jiang Hai is at this time is about 3 meters high. The whole roof is made of colored steel, the ground is made of cement, and the surrounding is also made of reinforced concrete. It is windproof and breathable. There is also a special sewage channel, feed trough, and so on. Can be said that it has everything. There is even an air conditioner in the cowshed to prevent the temperature here from being too high. On the other side of the cowshed there is a single lounge. People can rest here at night. Jiang Hai walked in and took a look. The lounge is not big, about 3 or 4 square meters. In addition to a single bed, there is only a table and a few chairs. But even so, it is quite good. At least there is a place to rest. When Jiang Hai came, Robbins Garcia was there brushing the cows. Cows are not like horses, so they don't need to be brushed all day. Horses will have problems if they are not brushed for a few days, but cows are not brushed under normal circumstances. Jiang Hai's manner is the same. However, these cows are here to participate in the competition. Brushing their hair will make them more beautiful. At least in terms of appearance, it will add some points. Looking at Jiang Hai walking around, Robbins Garcia can't help but smile and say, "Hey boss, you're here." Well, I'm here. The environment here is not bad. It's much better than the New York beef show. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai also said to him, to be honest, he quite likes the environment here. Yeah, after all, this is Texas, a paradise for cowboys. Haha, when I was young, I also came here to explore. I have to admit that with my skills in Winthrop, no, Boston, or even Massachusetts, I really don't respect anyone except Burke Dollar. But here, my level is only slightly better than a beginner. Shaking his head, Robbins Garcia said with some emotion, Texas and Montana, a paradise for cowboys, is not a joke. Purely in terms of skills, the strength of the people in these two places is indeed terrifying. Even Robbins Garcia has to admit defeat. According to him, in Texas, there are at least 8,000 if not 10,000 cowboys of his level. They dare not show off here. However, Jiang Hai didn't intend to hire any cowboys here. This was because the cowboys in Texas were notorious for their bad tempers. Perhaps it was because they were located on the border, but their customs were quite tough. If the Russians were a fighting nation, then the Texans were also half a fighting nation. It is very common to fight over a disagreement here. They are very xenophobic and are unwilling to leave their hometown, even if their hometown is very poor. Under such circumstances, if Jiang Hai wants to recruit people, those with real skills will not come. Moreover, Jiang Hai was quite confident in Robbins Garcia. This skill was enough for him. Jiang Hai was more interested in him, not because of his cowboy skills, but because of his management ability, which was a rare ability. After visiting the cowshed here, Jiang Hai also stayed here and chatted with Robbins Garcia. At night, Jiang Hai has to deal with Prawalton and Cheryl. In addition, he is the boss. He will not come at night, but he is still willing to come and take a look during the day. If Robbins Garcia wants to sleep, he can go back to sleep. If he wants to walk around, he can also walk around. 4 people watching is better than 1 person here. Robbins Garcia also knows Jiang Hai's thoughts. Although he and Jiang Hai have an employer-employee relationship, the two of them have a good private relationship. Therefore, they had a lot of topics to talk about. While talking, Jiang Hai also talked about Du Feimin's manner. But after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia frowned. In fact, using a helicopter to herd cattle is not good news. Because the sound of the helicopter is too loud, the cattle will be frightened after hearing it. Even if they are used to it, the noise will have some effect on them. They won't get fat. Without fat, there will be no marble veins. Just relying on our grass. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia said with some worry. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was also stunned. He only saw the spectacular scene there, but he really didn't think about this problem. The helicopter is indeed very loud. He felt a little uncomfortable listening to it, let alone those cows. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai can't help but want to call Du Feimin. His first boat of grass has been transported. If the helicopter doesn't produce marble-veined beef, then Jiang Hai will lose more than he gains. It's better to call and inform him. Tisish, you really don't know how to pretend to know. But just as he was about to call, a voice suddenly came from the opposite side of the cowshed. Jiang Hai and the others looked at the source of the voice and saw a few cowboys standing at the door of the opposite cowshed at this time. The voice came from one of them. Seeing Jiang Hai and the others looking over, the cowboy couldn't help but curl his lips in disdain. Boy, what did you say? Robbins Garcia's face was a little embarrassed when he was called a pretender. He has been herding cattle for decades, and now someone said that he is pretending to know? How can this be? Robbins Garcia picked up his pipe and knocked it gently. Robbins Garcia looked at the people in front of him and said, Cowboys are never afraid of trouble, even if the other party has more people than them. Old man, I said you are pretending to know. The cowboy here is also a calf who is not afraid of tigers, so he directly retorted. Okay, Dundee, don't bother with the layman. Hearing his words, the cowboys around him also said with a smile. What do you mean? Pretending to know when you don't know? Then tell me, what did I say wrong? Otherwise this matter won't end here. Looking at the young cowboys in front of him, Robbins Garcia squinted his eyes and said with a stern face. For him, face is very important, especially in front of Jiang Hai. He can't bear it. Robbins Garcia stood up and said to the people in front of him. Let's go. Robbins Garcia said sternly. Chapter 688. What can you do if you're not done? Foreigner, this is Texas. What can you do? Looking at Robbins Garcia with disdain, the man said proudly. He had to admit that the people here were really despicable. In fact, racial discrimination aside, they had an inexplicable sense of pride for their hometown, especially these cowboys. In fact, being proud of one's hometown was quite a good thing, but there was no need to be so proud. Anyway, Jiang Hai couldn't stand it at all. Like I said, Texans only know how to move their mouths. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai also stood up, patted Robbins Garcia's shoulder and said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the faces of the cowboys on the opposite side changed. Okay, I'll tell you and let you be convinced. After thinking for a while, the man just now couldn't help but walk out and look at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia with an arrogant face. They also knew that they couldn't fight here, otherwise they would be disqualified. Since they couldn't fight, they would directly show their strength and let these laymen know what they were capable of. The place you said used a helicopter to herd cows is a plain, right? There isn't much grass, but it's very open and quite hot. Looking at Jiang Hai, the young cowboy couldn't help but say. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai was a little disdainful of him, he also recalled. Indeed, Du Feimin's ranch was the same as what he said. It was a plain, after all, it was transformed from an oasis, so there were grasslands but not a lot of them. After a few years it would be much better. The area was also very large, and in the desert it was naturally quite hot. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai nodded. He didn't say these things just now. It seemed that the cowboy in front of him really had some skills. These are the necessary conditions for using a helicopter to herd cows. Because it's very open, the sound of the helicopter can't be reflected, so the sound isn't as loud as imagined. In addition, people who generally have the financial resources to use helicopters to herd cows will generally install some sound-absorbing steel around their ranch. These steel will absorb the sound and transmit it underground, so the sound of the helicopter won't be particularly loud. At most, it's a dozen decibels louder than a car grazing. The cows can completely withstand it. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, the cowboy couldn't help but talk to Jiang Hai. Now that he heard his words, Jiang Hai compared them. It seemed that the sound of several helicopters on Du Feimin's ranch was not much different from the sound of the helicopter on his ranch. Of course, people would feel uncomfortable listening to it. Seeing Jiang Hai's reminiscing look, the man smiled disdainfully and then continued, the most important thing about using helicopters to herd cattle is that it's fast. Because the pasture is too big, after the cattle are released, they will look for food everywhere. If they keep running around like this, the pasture is too big, and the cattle will easily get lost and die of thirst and anxiety. Using helicopters to herd cattle can gather the cattle at any time, and when they feel that they are about to drink water, they can drive them to the water source. This centralized management is convenient and saves a lot of trouble. The most important thing is that using helicopters to herd cattle is very easy. 5 helicopters can herd 1 million cattle, and this only requires a dozen or so flying cowboys. If they were replaced with ordinary cowboys, at least a few hundred people would be needed, or even 1,000 people would be needed. This is a huge expense. Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia couldn't help but look at each other. Jiang Hai definitely didn't understand, but he felt that this person's words were very powerful. On the other hand, Robbins Garcia thought about it carefully and felt that what this person said was actually right. After all, he knew a lot more. Do you understand, layman? Looking at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia's contemplative look, the cowboy laughed disdainfully. Young man, you're right, but you haven't considered the prerequisite. That is, the cows we want to raise have marbled patterns. Like what I said earlier, no matter how soft the sound is, the cows will still be frightened. Also, when the cows are moving too fast, the fat content in their bodies will decrease and become muscles. How do you solve this? Looking at the cowboy's disdainful smile, Robbins Garcia picked up his cigarette again, and said to him while filling it with tobacco. TSK, you guys really can't be that amateurish, right? Marbled beef needs to be raised carefully. As you said, driving helicopters to raise millions of cows, this is mass farming. You want to raise marbled beef? Uncle, you must be dreaming. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, the young man couldn't help but sneer, then said with a look of disdain. The whole world knew how terrifying the price of beef was when it was expensive. For example, Japanese Wagyu was really expensive to the point of making people's hair stand on end. As for the method of breeding and even the breed of cattle, some capable people could get it. But why were these cattle not famous outside of Japan? The main problem was the method of breeding. Everyone knew how to raise a Wagyu into a superb breed. Drinking red wine and massaging, these things were known to all. But almost no one knew how to do this. Those top-notch Wagyu were all products raised with such precision. How much did the labor cost now? If they did this, although the beef was expensive, a single cow really couldn't make much money. It might not even be as profitable as raising cattle in batches. Otherwise, no one was stupid. Since they knew how to raise cattle to make money, why didn't they do it? Wasn't it because it wasn't worth it at all? Now that he heard Jiang Hai and the others say that they wanted to raise marbled beef, the young man couldn't help but speak disdainfully. It's obvious that this kind of kid hasn't seen the world. Let's go, what's there to talk about with them? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai said to Robbins Garcia. This was considered as revenge for his mockery just now. But it was obvious that some people had to endure if they were insulting you, but if they were insulting them, then they couldn't. When the young cowboy heard Jiang Hai's words, he was instantly ignited and directly jumped up. You two are amateurs. How dare you say that I haven't seen the world? I've been playing on the ranch since I was 6 years old. It's been 18 years now. Last year I just won the Texas Cowboy competition. You say that I haven't seen the world? The young man pointed at Jiang Hai and the others and said loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was really stunned. This guy really had some background. The first place of the Texas Cowboy competition was very valuable, but unfortunately his personality was not very likable. 6 years old, 18 years old, that is to say you are now 24 years old. Didn't your father teach you how to talk to people older than you? Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled, then looked at the cowboy in front of him and said word by word. You bastard, what are you talking about? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cowboy's eyes narrowed and he looked at Jiang Hai with a vicious face and said, I'll repeat it again, I said that you have no upbringing. Looking at the young cowboy, Jiang Hai also took a step forward and said condescendingly, You yellow monkey, I think you are looking for death. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the young man couldn't help but shout loudly, You white pig, let's see who is looking for death. Hearing these obviously racist words, Jiang Hai's face darkened. It was useless to talk to these people. He dared to scold him, so Jiang Hai naturally had to scold him back. At the same time he clenched his fists. F***ck, this is Texas. But this white pig ignited the fire of war. These cowboys opposite were all white. Without saying anything, they directly rushed out of the cowshed, clenched their fists, and wanted to fight with Jiang Hai. Now they didn't care about the rules here. They just wanted to teach Jiang Hai a lesson. But unfortunately, before they had time to get close, Knerson Peters had already rushed up from behind. Although he was also white, he didn't mind Jiang Hai's words. Looking at the fiercest cowboy, he didn't say anything and punched him. With a loud bang, the man was instantly knocked to the ground by Knerson Peters. When the people behind saw this scene, they couldn't help but be stunned and then looked at Knerson Peters in horror. This man was not small, about 185 meters tall. Because he often herded, his body was also a pile of muscles, but at this time he was knocked down by Knerson Peters with one punch, which made them quickly calm down. What are you doing? At this time, a group of security guards in uniforms ran over from a distance. There were surveillance cameras in the vicinity. If anything happened here, the people in the distance would know. At first, they thought it was just a normal quarrel, but they didn't expect it to be a fight. Seeing the security guards coming over, these people became excited again. They took a step forward and shouted, but no one dared to rush forward again. What's going on? After separating the two sides, a security guard looked at the people on both sides with a headache and asked. These security guards were not the police. They were only here to maintain order. They did not care about anything. Looking at the scene in front of them, they knew without a doubt that it had something to do with the local culture in Texas. Racial discrimination in Texas was quite serious. Even if it was explicitly stated that such behavior was not allowed, there were still many people who would do so. As the saying goes, the law cannot punish the majority. If you want to live peacefully here, people of color more or less have to learn how to compromise. But outsiders like Jiang Hai and the others were different. They only came here for a short period of time, so no one would spoil them. Now looking at the situation, the security guard guessed that the cowboys here should be bullying strangers again. But it doesn't mean that he will care. He just wants to make sure that there is no conflict between the two sides. These three foreigners actually dared to call us white-skinned pigs. Looking at the security guard captain's words, the cowboys here couldn't help but shout with some excitement. In Texas, no one dared to say that to them. Hearing the words of the cowboy, the security guard captain also looked at Jiang Hai with some surprise. Then what do you mean by yellow-skinned monkeys? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai snorted coldly and said slowly. As soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, the security guard captain's heart skipped a beat, just as he thought. Okay, I can't do anything about this. What do you think? Do you want to call the police? Patting his forehead, the security guard captain said helplessly. It's better for him not to get involved in this matter. Call the police? As soon as they heard these two words, Jiang Hai and the cowboys all quieted down. The cowboys were quiet because they didn't want to call the police. Moreover, they were the ones who started the trouble first. There are surveillance cameras here. If they call the police, they won't be in a good position. As for the insults, no one here recorded it, so who knows who said it. As for Jiang Hai, if someone dared to scold him in Winthrop, they would definitely call the police. But this was Texas, and the most important thing was that Jiang Hai came here to participate in the competition. If he called the police and delayed the competition, then the gains would not make up for the losses. But this was Texas, and Jiang Hai came here to participate in the competition. So he glanced at the other party, waved his hand hatefully, and went straight into his cow sheet. The cowboys on the opposite side were not going to call the police. Seeing that Jiang Hai left first, they also shouted a few words, but then they all returned to the cow sheet. Seeing this scene, the security guard captain was also happy and relaxed. He turned around and left, but these cowboys looked at Jiang Hai and the others. They couldn't help but feel angry. They were used to being tyrannical here. Now that they suddenly met someone who dared to shout at them, they couldn't stand it. We can't just take this lying down. At this time, the cowboy who was beaten first, who had just recovered, rubbed his blue cheeks and said bitterly, "This is a big loss, he won't easily swallow it." Then what do you think we should do? There are surveillance cameras here. Looking at the cowboy in front of him, the people around him also asked in a low voice. To be honest, they can't take this lying down. This is their home ground. How can they be bullied like this? Isn't this taking a dump on their heads? Aren't these guys here to participate in the competition? There are many ways to deal with them. Now let's contact the other cowboys. We must let these guys go home empty-handed. Rubbing his face, the cowboy here said with a face full of hatred. Hearing his words, the other cowboys also moved. They joined forces to resist Jiang Hai and the others. In their eyes, there was nothing wrong with this. As for Jiang Hai, naturally he doesn't care. His goal from the beginning was not to fight with these cowboys. His vision is much bigger. Chapter 689. I heard that you had a grudge with the cowboys here during the day? Prawalton raised his head and looked at Jiang Hai in front of him. He had to admit that doing that kind of thing was addictive. They were busy during the day. When they returned to the hotel at night, Prawalton and Cheryl Lee didn't even have the leisure to eat. Instead, they directly pulled Jiang Hai into the room. When they stopped, Jiang Hai had to sit up helplessly and prepare to order some food. He hadn't eaten yet. Yeah, I had some conflicts with them. I told you I hate the people here. Jiang Hai spread his hands and said to Prawalton with some speechlessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton couldn't help but laugh. As a person of color, it was indeed not easy to make a living in Texas. According to the statistics of the United States, pure whites accounted for 52.4% of the population here. This was calculated more than 10 years ago. Now, it would only be higher than this, not lower than this. The second was Mexican. After all, this place was occupied by Mexico before. Blacks, who accounted for a large proportion of the population in the United States, only accounted for 11.5% here. Germans accounted for 9% and Irish accounted for 7.2%. The unemployment rate of people of color here was as high as 90%. 95.3% of people of color couldn't live here for a lifetime. They would always leave for one reason or another. It could be said that this was a paradise for white people. Even compared to Boston, the birthplace of racial discrimination, this place was worse. There was no other way. The people here were tough and a large proportion of them were cowboys. These people were stubborn as hell. He was just like that. You could do whatever you wanted and they were very united. Therefore, whether it was the state government or the United States government, there was nothing they could do about these people. Even though there were clear rules, they still scolded and scolded as they should. Anyway, they didn't have any money to pay. If anyone dared to arrest them, a group of cowboys would surround the police station and cause trouble. This sentence was not wrong at all in this case. As a businessman, you have to learn to hide your emotions so that others can't see your happiness and anger. Only then can you gain the upper hand at the discussion table. You're still too emotional now. Prawalton looked at the menu in Jiang Hai's hand and smiled. He didn't care that a certain part of his body was squeezed out of shape by Jiang Hai's chest. Well, it seems that I'm not a qualified businessman. Jiang Hai shrugged and said indifferently. These cowboys are very united. They can't do anything to you now, but after the exhibition starts the day after tomorrow, I don't know. You have to be prepared for them to target you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said seriously. Although she didn't know what these people would do, offending these bastards was indeed not a good thing. Well, this is a problem. Okay, I'll pay attention to it. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. But in his view, these people may only send people to find fault with him, that's all. If someone dares to come over and show off, then Jiang Hai doesn't mind letting them know why the flowers are so red. Jiang Hai's temper is not very good. I want to eat this. Cheryl, what do you want to eat? After finishing the business, Prawalton pointed at the menu and said. At the same time, she kicked Cheryl Lee in Jiang Hai's arms and asked her. I'm a little sleepy, I don't really want to eat. I'll just eat something. Cheryl Lee opened her eyes in a daze and said with a smile. Her physical fitness was far worse than Prawalton's. Don't forget, when they were in New York, this girl was abnormally crazy. Jiang Hai was afraid of hurting her body, so he injected a lot of aura into her. Because of this, her current physical fitness was quite good. After fighting with Jiang Hai, she would be able to recover in about 8 to 10 minutes. But for ordinary people like Cheryl Lee, they wouldn't be able to get out of bed easily in less than half an hour. You still have to eat something. What do you want to eat? Taking away Prawalton's little foot, Jiang Hai put his hand on Cheryl Lee's back, patted it gently and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee forced herself to be alert. Anything is fine, but I want you to feed me. Feed me mouth to mouth. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cheryl Lee said with a smile. You little slut. Listening to Cheryl Lee's request, Prawalton couldn't help but roll her eyes. This girl is really shameless. Jiang Hai listened to her and agreed with a smile. Then she happily ordered some spaghetti. After dinner was served, the three of them gathered together and had a delicious meal. However, Prawalton ate by herself, while Cheryl Lee sat naked on Jiang Hai's lap and let Jiang Hai feed her. Looking at the scene in front of her, Prawalton couldn't help but curl her lips. After eating, she directly threw Cheryl Lee on the bed. It seemed that she was going to reinvigorate herself. The next 2 days could be said to be calm. It was not an exaggeration to use this word to describe it. The person who fancied Prawalton and wanted to harass her didn't appear. The cowboys were also temporarily honest. It seemed that they were holding back their evil intentions and were waiting for the start of the exhibition to find trouble with Jiang Hai. So in the past few days, Jiang Hai and the others paid special attention, but it was in vain. The other party didn't make any excessive moves. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the exhibition to begin. After all, it was a Texas livestock exhibition. Although the Americans didn't like gongs and drums, firecrackers, red flags, and a sea of people, it was still very lively and quite impressive. It was just that it lacked a lot of formalities. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Jiang Hai and the others brought their cows to their own exhibition hall. The layout of the exhibition hall was much better than that of the cowshed. Each cow lived in a separate compartment. The compartment was surrounded by iron fences, allowing the cows to graze freely. Meanwhile, people could observe the situation of the cows from all directions. This was also the standard of the judges for the first 3 days. After the cows were sent to the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also received the details of the evaluation. The first 3 days were to evaluate the appearance of the cows, the size, the color of their hair, the brightness of their eyes, the tidiness of their teeth, whether there were any congenital defects, and so on. These were all things that had to be looked at. Each cow had its own independent interface. These judges would hide in the crowd and walk in to look at the cows. Then they would give the cows a score. The highest score was 10, and the lowest score was 0. There were also 8 options for scoring, which were similar to what was described above. Jiang Hai didn't look too carefully, but he knew that in terms of Angus cattle, his cows were worthy of being kings. Even if they were compared to other cows, he wouldn't be afraid. After looking at the situation, Jiang Hai didn't care about Robbins Garcia and the others who were very nervous around him. He slowly walked out of the exhibition hall. Jiang Hai had 1.2 million points of confidence in his beef cows. He didn't even have confidence in his cows. Walking out of the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also looked at the people around him. He had to admit that the Texas Yak Show was much bigger than the one in New York. Although he didn't like the people here, the cows here were indeed the most abundant in the United States, no, even the world. It was also very good. According to the display above, the Texas Yak Show was divided into two areas, namely the animal husbandry area and the rodeo area. The rodeo area was much smaller than the animal husbandry area. Starting from the preliminary round, there were a total of 3 major events: equestrian, goat snatching, and bull riding. Equestrian was divided into equestrian taming and horsemanship. Horsemanship was to ride a horse through obstacles. It wasn't the kind of dressage, but the kind of competition that tested a cowboy's horsemanship. It was the same for goat snatching. Among a flock of sheep, who could find the target sheep the fastest. Of course, it wasn't based on the sheep's face but on the sheep's body. But whoever rode the horse first and carried the sheep from the flock to the finish line would be the winner. The last one was bull riding. Jiang Hai had seen this before in the country's imperial court. It was just some simple protective gear and then ride on a mad bull to see who could last the longest. This competition was also the most dangerous one. First, it was really dangerous to fall from the bull's back. Second, the mad bull might attack the rider who fell to the ground. Every year, people would be injured or even killed in this competition. But in the United States, especially in the cowboy circle, this competition was the most eye-catching. The 3 competitions were divided into 3 days. After 3 days, the 64 people with the best results would enter the finals and start competing again. Obviously, ordinary tourists preferred to see the cowboys. So, early in the morning, the cowboy arena was already full of people. On the other hand, Jiang Hai's side was deserted, but no one was in a hurry. There was nothing to be anxious about because the selection here wasn't like the cowboys who fought for their own glory. They were here to do business. The tourists went to see the people, but the businessmen came to see the cows. This was the real money. Compared to the New York Beef Show, the Animal Husbandry Show's exhibition hall was about 5 times bigger than the one in New York. The security was more decent and there were more exhibition halls. There wasn't anything messy and there was no voting for tourists. T. The place here was bigger and more professional. At least in this respect, Jiang Hai had to admit that Texas was really good. Get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. But just as Jiang Hai was standing at the door, a slightly panicked voice suddenly came from the distance. Then Jiang Hai turned his head and saw a stinky cart filled with cow dung running towards him quickly. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai subconsciously wanted to get out of the way, but the cart seemed to be targeting him and ran straight towards him. Who the F***ck? Jiang Hai's reaction was not slow, but the cart was faster. At the same time, Jiang Hai glanced around and found that the cowboys nearby were looking at him with smiles on their faces. Of course, there was also a trace of strong disdain. Seeing that the cart full of cow dung was about to hit Jiang Hai instantly jumped back and dodged the cart. The people behind the cart didn't think that Jiang Hai could actually dodge at such a fast speed. They were stunned for a moment. But this person was worthy of being called a ruthless person. Since he couldn't hit Jiang Hai, he directly did it. His hand tilted, and the cart full of cow dung fell directly towards Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai immediately took a few steps back. But although he retreated beyond the safety line, the cart of cow dung was directly in front of his exhibition hall. In an instant, a stench came from under the cart, making the people who were originally walking on this road subconsciously retreat to the side. What do you mean by this? Looking at the cow dung in front of his door, Jiang Hai's eyes were about to spit fire. He thought about it and understood that this guy should be in cahoots with those cowboys. The reason why he did such a thing was that those cowboys made a move. What do you mean by, What do you mean? You just want to watch my cart fall down? Didn't you say that Wuxia is the help of etiquette? Why don't you want to touch the cart for me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but put his hands on his waist and said with an angry face. Hearing his unreasonable words, Jiang Hai laughed. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen such a shameless person. Why would he touch the dung cart for him? Help of etiquette? Is help of etiquette used for this? I'll help your uncle. Hurry up and get these things out of here. Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Oh, I won't do it. Hit me if you can. However, the man in front of him was really shameless. He looked straight at Jiang Hai and said. Hearing this man's annoying words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but clench his fists, but fortunately he held back. If he made the first move, he wasn't afraid of the police and money, but the exhibition hall would be destroyed. Boss, calm down. Call security. At this time, Robbins Garcia came out of the exhibition hall and looked at the angry Jiang Hai. He pulled Jiang Hai to the wind, then said something to Jiang Hai, then called Burke Dahl. In fact, he didn't need to say anything. Burke Dahl had already contacted the security guards. The quality of the security guards here was very good. Soon, a group of security guards rushed over, but when they arrived, they couldn't help but cover their noses and retreat far away. It should be known that cows were quite smelly. Cows especially liked to fart, and their poop was especially smelly. The smell was really pungent. Looking at the situation in front of them, they couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai and the man pushing the cart. What's the meaning of this? Chapter 690. Sir, you? What's going on here? Looking at the pile of cow dung in front of him, the security guard looked at Jiang Hai and asked carefully. You're asking me? Go and ask that fellow who ordered him to dump the cow dung here. Hearing the security guard's words, Jiang Hai pointed to the man standing in the distance with an indifferent look and said to him, Barton, what's going on here? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guard here walked in front of the man and asked him. It can be seen that this cowboy named Barton should be an old man here, otherwise, it's impossible for the security guard to recognize him. It's nothing, I was just pushing cow dung and I pulled my hand and accidentally fell over, that's all. Hearing the security guard's words, the cowboy named Barton didn't say anything bad about Jiang Hai. There are cameras everywhere here. If he wants to say more, he can directly change the camera. He will be even more passive, so instead of this, it's better for him to just say it. Then why don't you hurry up and clean up here? Hearing Barton admit it like this, the security guard didn't expect him to admit it so quickly. He thought that he would pester him for a while, but he didn't expect him to admit it so quickly. Since he admitted it, it's easy to deal with it. Whoever is responsible will deal with it. Oh, didn't you hear what I said just now? I pulled my hand and now I can't use my hand, so I can't do anything about it. I'm going to the hospital, sorry. Barton shrugged and said to the security guard, then turned around and left. Stop, you poured this pile of cow dung in front of my door, now you don't clean it up for me and you still want to leave? Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai's face was really black. He really didn't think that these cowboys would really do such a disgusting thing. Yes, these guys are not looking for trouble with Jiang Hai, they are just disgusting him. And the most important thing is that by doing this, the judges hidden among the public will not come close to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. No matter how good his cow dung is, no one will come to see it, so what's the use? Even if the judges endured the stench and came in, they wouldn't be able to withstand the stench. It was also impossible for them to take a closer look at his cow. If they were to casually give him a score and leave, the one who would suffer losses would be Jiang Hai. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai really wanted to go up and punch this guy, but he knew that he couldn't do it in broad daylight. I'm really sorry, but my hand is injured. You can't ask someone with an injured hand to work, right? This is the United States. We have to talk about human rights and freedom here. Barton looked at Jiang Hai. Although he apologized, there was a trace of disdain and pride on his face. He wanted to mess with Jiang Hai. He wanted to do it openly. Even if he was injured, who could do anything about it? You. Hearing Barton's words, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed and he couldn't help but take a step forward. However, Barton smiled and retreated, leaving just like that. Boss, what do we do now? Do you want me to catch him and teach him a lesson? Seeing Barton leave and Jiang Hai can't do anything to him, Bell Lester couldn't help but frown. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and asked him, We can't just do it. What about Robbins now? Jiang Hai patted Bell's shoulder and looked at Robbins Garcia and said. He gave Jiang Hai a reassuring look and walked directly to the security guard who was still standing here. I want to see your manager, tell him to come and see me. Robbins Garcia looked at the security guard in front of him and said calmly. You want to see our manager, what's the matter? When they heard that they wanted to see the manager, not only the domestic staff would be a little scared, but these security guards would also be a little scared, so they looked at Robbins Garcia and said, Look at our exhibition hall. I think you work here, so you should be familiar with it. We spent a total of $1.3 million to rent this exhibition hall for 7 days. $1.3 million. Now there is a pile of cow dung in front of our exhibition hall. I want to ask the manager here what's the meaning of this. Now I want to change the exhibition hall, or according to the contract, triple the compensation. Robbins Garcia looked at the security guard in front of him and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, the security guard here sweated all of a sudden. Perhaps for the exhibition, triple the compensation is not a lot, But this money is in the pockets of these people, how can they spit it out? They have to pay $3.9 million. They definitely won't take the money, and it is very likely that they will vent their anger on the security guard. This is a mistake in our work. I don't think we should alarm the manager. As for this pile of cow dung, I'll take care of it. After thinking for a while, the security guard said hesitantly. People under the eaves had no choice but to lower their heads. Now he was already cursing Barton in his heart. Of course there was also Robbins Garcia. These damn foreigners, but he couldn't say that out loud. After hesitating for a while, the security guard looked at his subordinates, but when he looked at them, these security guards politely avoided his gaze. What a joke, they can smell the cow dung. Whoever wants to do it can do it. Anyway, they don't want to do it. They can't earn much money a day as security guards here. When the time comes, they will be smelly and disgusting. The loss outweighs the gain. Americans were extremely picky about their jobs. They would rather quit the job than suffer from it. Looking at the evasive gaze of his subordinates, the security guard here is really in trouble. Well, I'll leave it to you. After 10 minutes, if this pile of shit is still here, I'm going to find your manager. Hearing the security guard's words, Robbins Garcia said with a serious face. After speaking, he walked to Jiang Hai's side. Jiang Hai also gave him a thumbs up. Sometimes, having an elder at home is like having a treasure. Robbins Garcia should talk about this at this time. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, the security guard here couldn't help but sigh. He gritted his teeth. He signed a captain-level contract with this exhibition. He was not a temporary worker. It would be difficult for him to give up this job. So after hesitating for a while, he decided to do it. Then he borrowed a shovel from Jiang Hai and asked his subordinates to turn the cow dung cart over. Then he resisted the urge to vomit and shoveled the cow dung into the cart. When he was almost done, he covered his nose and went to the side to vomit. After that, he stubbornly pushed the cart of cow dung away. Although it took half an hour, the cow dung was finally dealt with, but the smell didn't dissipate so easily. Jiang Hai and the others deliberately pulled out a water pipe from the exhibition hall and washed the ground here. The smell was quite strong. It didn't disperse for a long time. There weren't many people in the beef exhibition hall, and most people would walk around when they came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. It was really too smelly. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai and the others sitting in the exhibition hall had ugly expressions. But what could they do? When he thought of Barton, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gnash his teeth in anger. He was sure that Barton did it on purpose. At this time, Barton had already returned from outside. There was a circle of gauze wrapped around his hand. Of course it was just a disguise. He quietly walked into the exhibition hall. This exhibition hall was much bigger than the one Jiang Hai and the others were in. In the entire hall, there were almost 100 cows and more than a dozen different species. There were also a lot of people here. There were also 3 letters hanging outside the hall, SSR. Yes, this was one of the biggest livestock companies in Texas, SSR. It was also the company that had a conflict with Jiang Hai. After the man named Barton came in, he went straight to the lounge next door. In this lounge, he saw the man flirting with a female employee, so he coughed lightly and knocked on the door. Hearing that someone was here, the female employee immediately stood up and tidied up her clothes. She then winked at Barton and left. Barton's gaze followed the woman as she left. Fortunately, the man noticed him. How's it going? Looking at Barton, the person inside pretended to look through the information and said to him, "It's done. That Jiang Hai is really looking for trouble. Not only did he offend all the cowboys in Texas, he also offended you. If he didn't only participate in livestock shows, I would have already dealt with him. If he participates in a cowboy competition, I can guarantee that he won't have a complete ending." When he heard the man's words, Barton had a flattering expression on his face. Then he walked forward while talking. When the man heard Barton's words, he couldn't help but grin. This man was called Roland Shalater. He was the one who had a conflict with Jiang Hai. Originally, he was still thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai. After all, he hadn't been thrown out in a long time. But it was impossible to do it openly. Because Jiang Hai wasn't a person who lacked money. If he did it openly, he would lose face. So he could only play dirty. Just as he was thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai, he suddenly heard that Jiang Hai had offended all the cowboys in Texas. In fact, in Texas, if you offend a white cowboy, it was the same as offending all the cowboys in Texas. After all, the number of people of color was still too small, let alone a cowboy. And this morning he also heard that these cowboys wanted to deal with Jiang Hai. He had to admit that these cowboys were too simple-minded. They thought about it for 2 days, and the only way they came up with was to block the exhibition hall. They just directly pulled some people out and blocked Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. It was like some gangsters in China asking for protection. They didn't beat you or scold you. They just sat at the door and didn't let others in. In their opinion, if they don't let the judges in, then Jiang Hai's *T won't get any points. Naturally, he won't get any awards no matter how good his *T was. However, when Roland Starlit heard the news, he couldn't help but smile. These guys' brains were filled with muscles. In such a situation, wouldn't Jiang Hai inform the organizers? For the sake of their reputation, the organizers definitely wouldn't let these cowboys do that. They would just send security guards to drive these people away. At that time, if there was any conflict with the Americans' mentality, it was very likely that they would help build momentum for Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. If they wanted to ruin Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, they had to think of a special way. They had to make people hate his exhibition hall from the bottom of their hearts. They wouldn't be willing to go near it and spread rumors. The time was too short and Jiang Hai was a foreigner, so the effect wouldn't be good. Then they had to be more direct and make people unable to go in. That's why this morning's scene happened. This Barton was a Texas cowboy and also a member of his company. What he did today was taught by Roland Starlit. He had to admit that this guy had some talent in acting. Jiang Hai hated him so much that his teeth itched. "Boss, we finished Jiang Hai today. What are we going to do tomorrow? Do we still have to get cow dung?" Seeing that Roland Starlit was very satisfied with his actions this time, Barton couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, he rubbed his hands and said to Roland Starlit with a serious face, "They wouldn't just take revenge once. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, until Jiang Hai got out of here, they would disgust him. Tomorrow it's still cow dung, but we'll add more ingredients in it." Roland Starlit couldn't help but laugh when he thought of Jiang Hai's expression when he saw the truck full of cow dung. The more exasperated Jiang Hai was, the happier he was. How's today? Soon, the sun set in the west and the exhibition gradually came to an end. After the tourists left first, the beef cattle and cowboys also returned to their places. After Jiang Hai's beef cattle rushed back to the nest, Robbins Garcia took the first shift. Burke Dollar came again in the second half of the night. After dawn, Jiang Hai and the others came again to take the cattle to the exhibition hall. After settling the cattle, Jiang Hai also returned to the hotel. As soon as he came back, he saw that Cheryl Lee was waiting for him in the room. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little tired, Cheryl Lee came over and asked him, It's a little troublesome. Why is it only you? Where's Pa Walton?" With a chuckle, Jiang Hai asked Cheryl Lee, "Pa will come back a little later tonight. The staff of Sam's Club came over. She wants to invite them to dinner tonight. Connerson Peters is with her." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also explained with a smile, She's not here. I thought I could come back and ask her for her opinion." After throwing his coat on the sofa, Jiang Hai lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling. Jiang Hai felt that this matter might not be over. Chapter 691. What's wrong? Can you tell me about it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but raise her head with some doubts and said to Jiang Hai. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Actually, it's nothing. Didn't I offend the cowboys here a while ago? Originally, I had been guarding against them, so I asked Belle and the others to be careful. As a result, I was still tricked by them today." Hearing Cheryl Lee's words, Jiang Hai sat up and said slowly. Hearing that Jiang Hai was tricked, Cheryl Lee immediately came over and looked at Jiang Hai with some concern. It's nothing, I was just disgusted by them." Looking at her eyes, Jiang Hai smiled and patted her hand. No matter how lawless those people were, they didn't dare to directly find trouble with Jiang Hai. But today's behavior was really too disgusting. Then Jiang Hai told Cheryl Lee about what happened today. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was stunned. They can be so shameless? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but say with some surprise, "Yeah, it's quite shameless." She nodded. Even a shameless person like Jiang Hai said these people were boring. How shameless are these people? It really made Jiang Hai seem to be angered by both humans and gods. This matter is really not easy to deal with. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but rub her head and say, "These people can't be beaten, and scolding them won't relieve her anger. Moreover, they threw cow dung today. Jiang Hai doesn't believe that they will stop tomorrow." Thinking of this, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but feel a little numb because she didn't know what to do. The two of them sat on the big bed of the hotel, staring at each other, but they really couldn't think of any solution. "My name is MT Iron Wall Body." At this moment, Jiang Hai's cell phone rang. Looking at the phone, Jiang Hai picked it up. The person who called is none other than AI Xiaoxi. They call each other every night and it's time now. Hello Jiang Hai, have you eaten? A crisp voice came from the other side of the phone, followed by others' greetings. Not yet. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Listening to their voices, Jiang Hai seemed to even lighten up. It's so late and you haven't eaten yet? Are you very busy? Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunqian on the other side suddenly interjected. It's okay that I'm busy, but there are some things that are bothering me. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Hai said helplessly. He wasn't the type to only report good news. He would report good news and bad news. He was so annoyed today that he couldn't think of a solution by himself. Rather than that, he might as well talk to AI Xiaoxi and the others. Even if he couldn't think of a solution, he could treat it as a way to reduce his stress. Without AI Xiaoxi and the others asking, Jiang Hai talked about today's matter. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the other side couldn't help but be quiet. How is it? It's very troublesome. Hearing the other side quiet down, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a headache. Is it very troublesome? It's okay. But at this moment AI Xiaoxi suddenly said. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Is it very simple? How do we break this situation? Listening to AI Xiaoxi's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said with some eagerness. Actually, this matter is very simple. In my hometown there are also such people, but they are not cowboys, they are hoodlums. But from what you said, they are almost the same as the cowboys there. These people eat, drink, have sex, gamble and smoke every day. Many of them are addicted to flour and the like, squandering their family fortune, their bodies are ruined and they are sick. But they still need money to do these things, so they will blackmail some rich people and throw dead mice, dead cats and the like into the yard of these rich people. You can't hit them, but with their physical condition, one punch is enough to make them lie in bed for half a year, and then you have to take care of them for half a year. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai frowned. If such a person was by his side, he really wanted to beat him to death. But if he dies with such a person, it's really not worth it. It's similar to the current situation, but it's not so bad. What's the solution? Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. There are two ways to solve this. One is to directly find the local police. If you have a good relationship with them, find the police to arrest them. After you teach them a lesson inside, they won't come to provoke you when they come out. Of course, the premise is that you can't provoke them. The second is to confront them head-on. Didn't he pour cow dung on you here? Then you can dump cow dung on them too. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Yes, if they dump cow dung on me, then I can dump cow dung on them too. Giving them a taste of their own medicine. But the prerequisite is that you have to know who the other party is. If it's really like what you said, your opponent is just a small cowboy, in fact I think it's better to find someone to beat them up. If you're still angry, you can try Croton. At this time, Chi Jie's voice came from the phone, but there was a trace of strangeness in her words. Croton? Listening to Chi Jie's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Isn't this game for diarrhea? What do I do with this thing? You have to find those people who hurt you and then you have to find a way to give them some Croton. Don't worry, this thing can't be detected in the United States. The medical system in the United States is very poor. They can't even detect food poisoning. At most, they can only prescribe some medicine to stop diarrhea, but you can make them feel good. Listening to Chi Jie's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This is a good idea. But the most important thing now is that you have to know who is targeting you. This is also very important. Feeling that Jiang Hai listened, Chi Jie also said seriously on the phone. It was impossible to directly face the entire state. It was important to find the person who stood out. Okay, I got it. After Chi Jie and others studied it, Jiang Hai also had a rough idea. He has never been a very obedient person. He will make trouble for these people no matter how others make trouble for him. He has never been a kind person. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai did not stay at home. Instead, he went downstairs and drove to the cowshed. Less than half an hour after he left, Prawalton also came back. When she saw that Jiang Hai was not in the hotel, she was stunned, and after Cheryl Lee told her about Jiang Hai today, she couldn't help but laugh. Then Prawalton made a phone call, and a man with a slightly anxious tone was on the other side of the phone. Miss Walton, I don't know if Mr. Jiang would like to meet and talk about the cooperation? Before Prawalton could speak, the person on the other side of the phone said seriously. It could be heard that his words were extremely anxious. Jiang Hai doesn't know about the cooperation because he is out, but I can take you directly to the exhibition hall tomorrow to see him. You can also see his cow. What do you think, Mr. Sean? Listening to the anxious voice on the other side of the phone, Prawalton said with a smile. Of course, no problem. Hearing Prawalton's words, the man named Sean on the other side of the phone agreed. It's solved. After hanging up the phone, Prawalton looked at the puzzled Cheryl Lee and said with a smile. Cheryl Lee blinked. In fact, to be honest, she didn't understand how it was solved, but she believed in Prawalton. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know that Pula Walton had helped him solve this seemingly troublesome matter. He was still studying his own plan. Croton and the like, he could just buy it now. Jiang Hai knew that there was a sea merchant supermarket nearby. If there was a sea merchant supermarket, it meant that there was a Chinese settlement. If he wanted to buy some Croton there, it wouldn't be a very troublesome thing. As long as he didn't kill anyone, it would be a small matter. If he wanted to find out who was dealing with him, the person named Barton was very important. But if he wanted to find out where he was, he would have to use other people. After all, he was too eye-catching. Robbins Garcia was also at the scene of the conflict that day, so it was inconvenient for him to show up. Burke Dollar was naturally more boring and not suitable for inquiring about things. Bell Lester was a very good candidate. Young, frivolous, and because he had lived in the Triangle State, his spoken English was very good. He was indeed the best candidate to find someone. After arriving at the cowshed, Jiang Hai talked to Bell Lester. Bell Lester immediately left the cowshed. After changing his clothes, he inquired about a Texas cowboy bar and sneaked in. In Texas, cowboys were one of the symbols here. Naturally, the cowboy bar here was also quite popular. Of course, he couldn't go in wrong because in the United States, sometimes cowboys also represented another culture. In the past, the Chinese director Ong Lee once made a movie that caused a sensation in Hollywood. It was called Brokeback Mountain. The protagonists in the movie were two cowboys and then they cough. In the words of a song, the general idea was, gay friends in the wind and rain. But in the United States, cowboy bars and sailor bars were sometimes bars that engaged in that kind of special relationship. Bell was very straighter than steel, so he must go to a normal bar. Fortunately, he was also a cowboy, so he still knew how to distinguish. After finding the bar, he paid the entrance fee. Of course, it was paid by Jiang Hai. He walked into the bar. He sat down at the bar and ordered a glass of expensive wine. Then he listened to the music as he drank. As soon as he walked in, he attracted a lot of attention. Of course, most of them were women. Bell was quite eye-catching in general. He was fair and clean. Because he had a good figure, he especially liked to wear a small shirt that could show off his muscles unless it was winter. There was a Special Forces identity tag hanging around his neck. Years of military life made him like to keep a very unique buzz cut. When he stayed in places like bars and nightclubs, it was indeed quite attractive. A wild, handsome white guy who used to be a soldier was enough to make those women go crazy. Looking at those women who were throwing flirtatious glances at him, if it was a normal day, Bell would have used his flirting skills. But today he had business to do. After drinking a glass of wine, he ordered another one and then looked at the bartender. Hey man, your music here is really good, Bell said while shaking his head slowly. Of course, our music, wine, and beautiful women here are the best in San Antonio. Hearing Bell's praise, the bartender here also said with excitement. At the same time, his eyes were also looking at a beautiful woman on the dance floor in the distance. Hearing his words, Bell also glanced back. He remembered that this beautiful woman just gestured to him, so he chuckled. This guy is about to take the bait. Music and wine, I've tasted it. Beautiful woman, I'm going to try it. Taking out a Franklin and stuffing it into the jar next to him, Bell finished speaking and walked into the crowd. Not long after, he returned to the bar with a beautiful woman in each arm, then winked at the bartender, but the bartender's face was a little ugly, because one of the beautiful women in Bell's arms at this time was his goddess. Seeing his gaze, Bell was more sure that he did the right thing. Hey beautiful women, I saw a scene when I was at the exhibition today. It was so interesting. A guy hurt his hand and then threw cow dung everywhere. Cow dung, ha. After a few simple greetings and after ordering wine, Bell laughed and told what happened today as a joke to the two girls, and the girls were very happy to hear it. They didn't really come to listen to jokes. Naturally, they will like to listen to whatever Bell says. They only care about Bell and the Franklin in his pocket. But this scene in the eyes of the bartender opposite was burning with jealousy. Hurt his hand? Hey bro, you probably don't know the details. Just now he endured for a long time and didn't interrupt. Now that he finally had a chance to speak, the bartender said slowly while wiping the wine glass. Oh, is there any secret in this? Hearing the bartender's words, Belle's eyes narrowed and he pretended not to care. Of course, the person who turned the car over is called Willie Barton. He is right there. Do you think he hurt his hand? When the bartender heard Belle's words, he smiled proudly and pointed to the guy who was dancing hard on the dance floor. Chapter 692. Following the bartender's gaze, Belle glanced at the crowd. Sure enough, he saw the guy dancing on the dance floor. Although the lights were a bit dim, Belle recognized him at a glance. It was Barton. He was still wearing his daytime clothes and had a piece of gauze wrapped around his arm. It was this guy who looked like an idiot when he was dancing, but he caused a lot of trouble for Jiang Hai. After knowing his goal, Belle smiled. He remembered Jiang Hai's words. First, don't expose yourself so as not to alert the enemy. Second, find out who was behind this guy. Was it someone who was targeting Jiang Hai, or was it the Texas Cowboys? These 2 points might be troublesome for others, but for Belle it was a piece of cake. After confirming the identity of the person, Belle deliberately placed a wine glass in front of him. Then he placed the watch he bought for $50,000 against the glass. Seeing his actions, the 2 girls beside him were surprised. They clearly saw that this watch was from Jordan's Legacy series. This watch was sold for $520,000 in China, but it wasn't that expensive in the United States. It was only $50,000, but it was still $50,000. People here might not even make $50,000 in a year. Looking at the watch, they were a bit shocked. The 2 girls were shocked at the wealth of this man who looked good, and the bartender was shocked at how bold this guy was. He actually dared to take off the watch. Right now, he was only thinking maliciously if Barton forgot to take it with him. If he didn't, then he would have to pick it up. But unfortunately, Belle put the watch here mainly to use the reflection of the dial to observe Barton's movements. Watches like this don't reflect light because they were afraid of dazzling the eyes. Well, it could also be for other reasons. But Belle knew how to make it reflect light. He just needed to borrow a wine glass. So he was multitasking. While chatting with the 2 girls, he was also observing Barton. After about half an hour, the 2 girls were almost leaning on him. It was as if they were saying, "Hurry up and take me away, I can't hold it anymore." But Belle was still calm. Finally, Barton finished his dance. Perhaps he was a little tired, so he said goodbye to his partner and walked to the bathroom in the distance. Seeing him move, Belle also moved. Under the bartender's disappointed gaze, she picked up the watch and put it on her wrist. "I'm going to the bathroom, then we'll leave, okay?" Looking at the 2 intoxicated girls, Belle said with a smile. Of course. Facing Belle's invitation, the 2 girls weren't shy or embarrassed. Instead, they said this with a smile. They had been waiting for Belle to say this, and now that Belle finally said it, they naturally wouldn't oppose it. After Belle finished talking to them, he chuckled and followed Barton to the bathroom. The bathroom here is not like the bathrooms in the nightclubs. There are often people having sex in there, so even outside the men's bathroom there are a lot of people lining up. This cowboy bar is not so messy, so there are no people outside the men's bathroom. After Belle watched Willie Barton walk in, he followed him in. At the same time, he picked up a plastic bag from the trash can next to him. After walking into the bathroom, Belle glanced at the urinal area and saw that only Willie Barton was there. Belle walked over and directly put the plastic bag on his head without saying a word. Willie Barton felt that his vision turned black, and breathing became difficult in an instant. Willie Barton couldn't help but struggle immediately, but unfortunately Belle was much more ruthless than him. Seeing him struggling, Belle punched him directly in the stomach. In an instant, the man couldn't struggle anymore, but the early struggle still had some effect. At least the plastic bag was broken so he could breathe normally. Then Belle went up and kicked him without saying a word. After a minute, Barton recovered. Sorry brother, who are you? Stop hitting, what's going on? Damn it, who the hell is it?" Feeling Belle's punches and kicks, Willie Barton didn't do anything other than holding his head, and it was impossible for him to do anything else. Willie's punch just now was enough to make him lose his fighting power. How could he resist? "Kid, is your name Willie Barton? Don't deny it, I've been watching you all night. Do you remember who the woman you danced with today? It doesn't matter if I tell you that's my wife. I saw you touch her body no less than 30 times. Hee, I think you don't want your hand anymore." Belle grabbed Willie Barton's collar and said angrily. However, his words were now in a Texas accent, mixed with a hint of Mexican. I really don't know, really brother, let me go, I will never appear in front of him again." She is a typical white woman, wearing a purple-red deep V-neck shirt. She does look a little old, about 30 years old. She does look like a married woman, but he didn't expect that the husband of this married woman would also come. Thinking of this, Willie Barton couldn't help but shout loudly. "It's too late, your hand is mine." Belle heard Willie Barton's words and laughed sinisterly. "No, no, I'm from SSR Company, brother, we're all Texans, let's talk things over." Hearing that Belle was going to take his hand, Willie Barton couldn't help but start randomly mentioning people. Unfortunately, he only knew one of the higher-ups. SSR Company? After hearing Willie Barton's words, Belle's heart skipped a beat, but he still pretended to be confused and fearful. As a native of Texas, there was no way he didn't know about SSR. It was a giant company. Of course, that was only for the average cowboy. Knowing that Willie Barton was a native of Texas would be a little intimidated. "Yes, I'm from SSR Company. I just got in touch with their CEO's son, Roland Starlit. Today I did something big for them." Maybe it was out of fear, or maybe it was to show off his relationship with Roland Starlit, Willie Green immediately said. "Bastard. I must be a crazy Texan. Remember, you haven't seen me before or I'll take you to hell with me, you bastard." Pretending to be crazy and scared, Belle shouted loudly in Willie Barton's ear, and finally kicked his stomach before leaving the bathroom. But as soon as he left, he changed into a different appearance. He returned to the bar with a smile, and under the envious gaze of the bartender, he left the bar with the two blondes in his arms and went to a small hotel nearby to get a room. As for what he was going to do, it was needless to say. After being satisfied, Belle threw down $200, then went downstairs and drove back to the cowshed. As for Willie Barton, it took him 2 minutes to rush out of the bathroom like a madman, but unfortunately he was destined to come up empty-handed. With a swollen face, he found the woman just now, but while he was in the bathroom, the woman had already thrown herself into the arms of another man. Willie Barton knew this man, he was a veteran cowboy in the area, and he couldn't afford to offend him. In the end, he could only bitterly give up and pretend that he stepped on someone's **** when he went out today. After paying for tonight's drinks, he went to the nearby red light district with a face full of dissatisfaction. He needed to vent his anger. On the other side, after Belle returned to the cowshed, he told the news to Jiang Hai, who was guarding there. "So it's SSR Company behind this. How should we deal with these guys?" Rubbing his chin, Jiang Hai began to think. "Tomorrow let's get a truck full of cow dung and dump it in front of their company. What do you think?" Belle whispered to Jiang Hai when he saw him thinking. Hearing this, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment, and decided to dump cow dung. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But the problem was, this was too childish. Jiang Hai didn't want to do this. If he was going to do it, he had to do it even more ruthlessly. And what was more ruthless than cow dung? Human dung? But it would be very disgusting to do this, and Jiang Hai didn't want to disgust himself. Maybe the miraculous Chinese medicine of Wuxia will come in handy. Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said with a smirk. Jiang Hai patted Belle, indicating that he should go back to sleep first. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, was thinking about what to do tomorrow. The night passed quickly. Soon it was dawn. Robbins Garcia and Burke Dollar had also arrived. Belle had rested for the night and was in good spirits. The three cowboys cooperated with the cart and pulled the three cows to their own exhibition hall, ready to start the show. Jiang Hai drove his car and left first. He went to San Antonio's Chinatown. In the United States, as long as it was a big city, there would be a Chinatown. It was just a matter of size. As mentioned earlier, people of color in Texas didn't live very well, so the Chinatown here wasn't very big. However, this was the 7th largest city in the United States after all. In terms of cities alone, there were still many people here. There was also a sea merchant supermarket here. Jiang Hai went to the supermarket first and explained the situation to the person. Of course, he had called Zhang Dihai before this, and the old man also clearly explained Jiang Hai's situation to this person. So when Jiang Hai came, the person in the supermarket took Jiang Hai to the nearby Chinese medicine hall. There, Jiang Hai bought croton with the name of the sea market, but it was not the normal grain but croton powder. This kind of medicine was originally used to treat illnesses in traditional Chinese medicine, just like the original marijuana. It was medicine, not poison. Croton was used to treat chest and abdominal pain, lack of bowel movement, diarrhea, dysentery and other diseases, but Jiang Hai was using it to harm people. After confirming that the hospital in the United States wouldn't be able to detect this thing, Jiang Hai left the place. After returning to the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai and Belle looked at each other. They were going to take revenge today. The exhibition hall was left to Robbins Garcia and Burke Dollar, so they could handle everything. Jiang Hai and Belle went to the SSR exhibition hall. Just as they were about to head to the SSR exhibition hall, Roland Starlit called Willie Barton over. What happened to you? Looking at the bruised and swollen face of Willie Barton, Roland Salad was stunned for a moment, then asked him. Haha, when I came home last night the lights were too dark so I fell. Boss, if you have something to say just say it. Hearing Roland Salad's words, Willie Green had an awkward smile on his face. Indeed, this matter was too embarrassing for him. Forget it, I don't care how you got this injury, is today's cow dung ready? Looking at Willie Barton in front of him, Roland Salad said with a serious face. It seems that he is addicted to tricking Jiang Hai. Don't worry, I added something today. Hearing Roland Salad's words, Willie Barton also said with a serious smile on his face. That's good, then let's do it. Looking at Willie Barton's smile, Roland Salad was sure that this guy wouldn't let him down. But just as the two were about to discuss again, suddenly there was a commotion in front of the exhibition hall. Roland Salad heard the noise in front of him and walked out of the lounge. As a result, he saw Jiang Hai walking inside at a glance. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai coming in, his right eyelid couldn't help but twitch. He felt that Jiang Hai seemed to be here to denounce him, so he immediately winked at Willie Barton, and he immediately hid in the lounge next to him. Sir, you can't force your way in. At this time the staff in front were still trying hard to stop Jiang Hai, but how could they stop Jiang Hai's strength? He just pushed the crowd aside and walked inside saying, Isn't this the exhibition hall? I'm here to learn, why are you stopping me? Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the people here couldn't say anything. Don't stop him, go do what you need to do. At this moment, Roland Salad came up from behind after tidying up his suit. He looked at Jiang Hai in front of him, raised his head proudly and said to Jiang Hai. Seeing the main character come out, Jiang Hai also quietly made a gesture behind his back. The show is about to start. Chapter 693. Nothing, I just came to see the strength of one of the top livestock companies in Texas. This exhibition hall is indeed much bigger than mine. Hearing Roland Salad's words, Jiang Hai also said seriously. Oh, it is indeed much bigger than yours. After all, we are a company here. Oh, sorry, I heard that you are also a company, Tenglong Company? It's really a company. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Roland Salad also said with a smile. He felt that when his voice fell, Jiang Hai's face became a little ugly. Don't be complacent, you were the one who poured cow dung in front of my exhibition hall yesterday. Narrowing his eyes, Jiang Hai looked at Roland Salad and said seriously. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Roland Salad's eyes also narrowed, but he did not retreat. Oh, I don't understand what you are talking about. Although there are some contradictions between us, I am still a businessman after all. A businessman should focus on making money, right? I don't understand what I can get by pouring cow dung in front of your exhibition hall. You are not really naive to think that those cows in your exhibition hall can get a ranking. Gently touching the ring on his finger, Roland Salad said with a smile. You're just pretending to be confused, Willie Barton. Hearing him directly deny his words, Jiang Hai also took a step forward. Again, I don't know what you are talking about. Shrugging, Roland Salad would not admit it. But his expression was clearly saying, yes, I did it. What can you do about it? You are pretending to be ignorant. Looking at Roland's expression, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He instantly stretched out his hands and lifted Roland Salad up. As soon as he lifted Roland Salad, almost everyone gathered around him. However, Roland Salad stretched out his hand and stopped these people in midair. Don't come over. Turn on your phone and start recording. At the same time, inform the security guard. I want to see if he has the guts to beat me. Listening to Roland Salad's words, the people here hesitated for a moment, but they still picked up their phones and started recording. But while these people were watching and taking photos, no one noticed that Bell had pretended to be a tourist and sneaked into the exhibition hall. At the same time, using the crowd as cover, he came to the bucket water fountain here in the blind spot of the camera. He gently pulled the bucket off the water fountain, then took a bag of brown powder and poured it into the water. The powder melted after it was poured into the water. Then he gently put the bucket of water on the water fountain again and slowly prepared to leave from the back door. But halfway through he found Willie Barton's body passing by the back door. Seeing this scene, Bell followed with a smirk on his face. Jiang Hai, who was watching Bell leave, also laughed in his heart. Now what he had to do was to find a group of people to come down. Just as he was about to wait for the security guards to come down, suddenly, the phone in his pocket rang. So, he pretended to be angry and let go of Roland Salad. He picked up the phone and glanced at it. It turned out to be a call from Prar Walton. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai glared at him, then took the phone and walked out of the hall. Okay, let's disperse. Looking at Jiang Hai's helpless expression, Roland Salad couldn't help but smile proudly. Even if Jiang Hai guessed that he was the one who did it, what could he do? He still had to obediently let go of him. Thinking of this, Roland Salad couldn't help but raise his head proudly, but the scene just now was still very scary. He felt that he was almost beaten up. He was nervous before, so he didn't notice anything. Now that he was not nervous, he felt that his throat was a little tight and he was a little thirsty. He glanced at the water dispenser in the distance, walked over, picked up a disposable paper cup, and drank it in one gulp. Hello, calling me at this time, what's the matter? On the other side, Jiang Hai, who walked out of the exhibition hall, also picked up the phone and asked Prawalton on the other side of the phone. This phone call was indeed a good way to get out of the embarrassing situation, but Jiang Hai was indeed a little curious. It's nothing, I just went to your exhibition hall and found that you weren't there, so I called to ask about it. There's one more thing, a local wants to discuss a business with you. If it's convenient for you, you can come back. Listening to Jiang Hai's voice on the other side of the phone, Pula Walton followed him and spoke. Hearing that there was something going on in the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also glanced at the SSR exhibition hall. He didn't know what would happen later. With a smile on his face, Jiang Hai walked towards his exhibition hall. While he was walking towards his exhibition hall, on the other side, Bell was quietly following Willie Barton. He wanted to see what this guy wanted to do. Willie Barton did not know that Bell was following him. Although he was very careful, he was not a professional. He walked and stopped all the way until he reached the cowshed where the cows used to be. It was where the cows stayed at night. Hey Willie, you're here. As soon as Willie Barton walked to the cowshed, a voice came from inside. If Jiang Hai or Robbins Garcia were here, they would definitely recognize that voice. It was the voice of the cowboy who had a conflict with them. It seems that these people have already joined forces. Thinking about it, Jiang Hai was the enemy of all Texas cowboys. Is the thing ready? After hearing this man's words, Willie Barton also said eagerly. After hearing his words, the cowboy on the other side also replied immediately. Yes, it's not that good. Let's try it. It's all ready. This is the cow dung from the past few days and it's been seasoned. A lot of our stuff is mixed in, hee. Hearing Willie Barton's words, the cowboy said disgustedly, but he didn't feel anything wrong at all. This time let's teach those foreigners a lesson. How dare they look down on us? Cough, this smell is too strong, I'll push it out first. Hearing the cowboy's words, Willie Barton couldn't help but speak a little louder. But just as he spoke a little louder, he inhaled the smell and couldn't help but retch. It was really too smelly. Willie Barton took out a mask and put it on his face. Then he pushed the cart out of the room. Looking at his figure, Bell couldn't help but sneer. This time they will know what it means to reap what they sow. Thinking of this, Bell continued to follow him to the exhibition hall. At this time, Jiang Hai had returned to his exhibition hall. Because there was no smell, there were still some people in the exhibition hall at this time. Of course, the most important group of people was Prawalton and her team. In addition, there were two men in front of her, an old man who looked about 60 years old and a middle-aged man who was about 40 years old. They were talking to Prawalton at this time. After seeing Jiang Hai walk in, Prawalton couldn't help but smile and waved at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk in when he saw them. The researchers over there also took the initiative to walk over when they saw Jiang Hai. Mr. Jiang Hai, I have to admit that the cattle you raised are still perfect, even better than last year. You will definitely get a good result in this exhibition. Among them, the oldest researcher had been full of praise ever since he saw the cow. This was the most beautiful Angus cow he had ever seen. It was almost as if he had seen it in textbooks. It had perfect fur, perfect bone structure, perfect muscles, and most importantly, it had a trace of spirituality. This kind of cow was really amazing. I hope so too. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then came to Prawalton's side. He was really curious, why did Prawalton call him over? Hey Jiang, your cattle here are still so good, haha. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, Prawalton said with a smile, but she couldn't help but laugh because she accompanied Jiang Hai to pick these cattle. Well, what's the matter? Looking at Prawalton in front of him, Jiang Hai signaled with his eyes that there are other people here. Sure enough, under Jiang Hai's gaze, Prawalton also withdrew her gaze and returned to her iceberg state. Come, let me introduce you. This is Luke Sean, one of the top ranchers in Texas. His nature is not much different from yours. He is also a homeowner. In addition, he is also a businessman and has shares in many companies such as Microsoft, Google. This is his son, Anthony Sean. This is Jiang Hai. If you have anything to say, you can talk to him directly. After a brief introduction, Prawalton let Jiang Hai and the others talk by themselves. It is inconvenient for her to intervene in some things. Hello, Mr. Jiang Hai. I've heard a lot about you. After hearing Prawalton's introduction, Luke Shan shook hands with Jiang Hai. Then his son Anthony Shan also shook hands with Jiang Hai. When shaking hands, Jiang Hai felt very strange. What are these people doing? With all due respect, we don't seem to be very familiar with each other, so let's get straight to the point. May I know why you are looking for me? After hesitating for a while, Jiang Hai decided to say it directly. Otherwise he would be a little depressed. Well, yes, this time we came to find Mr. Jiang Hai. It is indeed a little abrupt. Let me explain our purpose. We are looking for Mr. Jiang Hai mainly to buy fodder from Mr. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke Shan smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai had some doubts. Buy fodder? I would like to ask, what is this for? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai felt a little strange. At present, only Du Feimin knew that he was selling fodder. How did he know? This made Jiang Hai somewhat puzzled. Coincidentally, we are one of the companies, so I know a little about your feed. The nutrition in your feed is really beyond our expectations. After cows eat your feed, as long as they are raised carefully, they can grow marbled beef. We are very interested in this, so we came here to buy your feed. I don't know if you are interested in this business. Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke Shan went straight to the point and asked Jiang Hai directly. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment, then inwardly scolded Du Feimin, this idiot. Was he crazy? Didn't he know how to make a fortune in silence? Didn't he know to use his own royal institution to do the testing? Jiang Hai also posted it all over the world. It was impossible for Jiang Hai not to attract other people's attention. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. In a while, he would definitely make a call and ask this guy if his brain was damaged. In principle, I agree to sell the fodder. However, the price and quantity may be a little troublesome. After all, I also need to raise cattle in my manor. I have to ensure that my cattle are full before I can sell some. In addition, the quantity requested by Dubai is quite large, so it is difficult for me to directly agree here. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to call Du Feimin first to ask about the situation. If Du Feimin was really an idiot, then Jiang Hai could just not sell his feed in the future. At the same time, if he wanted to sell, he would have to discuss with Robbins Garcia and the others how much of the cattle and feed in the manor could be left. This is what we should do. We came here today to offer the intention of cooperation. I don't know when you can give us a reply? Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't say no and only said that he wanted to study it, Luke Shan didn't know that there was a chance. After doing business for so many years, he could see that Jiang Hai would sell his feed to anyone. What he said just now was also very particular. Although he didn't say anything bad about Dubai's royal family, it also faintly revealed that Dubai's royal family didn't seem to believe Jiang Hai. He was also burying a line between Jiang Hai and Du Feimin. If something really happened, then this line would be exposed. If nothing happened, then he wouldn't have any problems. These old guys who had lived for a long time weren't easy to deal with. Chapter 694. If there are no accidents, tomorrow will be fine. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai said to Luke Shan. He could actually do it this afternoon, but there was no need to rush. It was as if he cared about this deal, but in fact, Jiang Hai didn't care much about this. If that's the case, it's really great, then I'll come back tomorrow. Hearing that Jiang Hai gave a satisfactory answer, Luke Shan couldn't help but smile and say, then after a few polite words with Jiang Hai, the three shook hands and parted ways. When the two walked out of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, Anthony Shan, who had hardly spoken, looked at his father. Father, I don't understand, why don't we study the composition of his grass and make it ourselves, or buy his ranch directly? Buying grass like this, when will it end? And the most important thing is that the lifeline is still in his hands. Looking at Luke Shan, Anthony Shan couldn't help but say with some doubts. To be honest, their family's power in Texas is almost the same as Jiang Hai's in Winthrop. They are basically like local tyrants. They can get whatever they want. This is the first time they have taken the initiative to seek cooperation. You don't understand, this Jiang Hai is very useful. Hearing his son's words, Luke Shan smiled and said mysteriously. I don't quite understand. Hearing Luke Shan's words, Anthony Shan couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Child, you are still too young. This Jiang Hai can now sell grass so fearlessly, which means that he is absolutely sure that we can't copy the grass. Now we are seeking cooperation, first to get closer to him and second to guard against the Middle East. You can't be naive to think that after the royal family of Dubai raised good beef, they will eat all of it themselves. That is more than 1 million cattle, and their target of dumping, if there is no accident, must be Europe and the United States. The high-end beef market in Asia has been occupied by Japan. When the time comes, I ask you, who will be the biggest hit? Looking at his son, Wuxia also said with a smile. Montana and us? After hesitating for a moment, Anthony Sean's eyes lit up. After all, he was not a fool and he was already in his 40s. He had been in the business world for more than 20 years. He could see very clearly. With just a little bit he would understand. Oh, if we cooperate with Shanghai, we can keep our own market share and study the market outside. It's a win-win situation. The most important thing is that we can't figure out the secret of Shanghai's fodder now, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it in the future. By then. Hearing this, Anthony Sean had completely figured it out. According to the Wuxia people, this is called the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first? Hearing what his father said, Anthony Sean also said with a smile. At this time, Shanghai didn't know about the wishful thinking of the father and son duo. In fact, even if he knew, he would probably just laugh disdainfully. They wanted to study the secrets of the grass? They are really blind. If they can figure it out, he can give it to them. But the problem is that there is only one Dragon Ball in this world, and that thing is in Shanghai's body. Unless they cut Shanghai into pieces and study it, it is absolutely impossible. Moreover, with Shanghai's current net worth of billions of dollars, the relationship between Shanghai and the Walmart Group, the relationship between Shanghai and the royal family of Dubai, and the relationship between Shanghai and Wuxia, unless Shanghai wants to die, no one dares to touch him. Especially in terms of personal safety. As for cattle, fish and grass, they can study it if they want. As long as they don't go against the state agencies, Shanghai doesn't care, because he knows that they can't figure it out. And these people don't dare to go against him openly. After all, as they said, Shanghai still has the lifeline of their money. In the United States, everything is based on money. No one will go against money, including these people. I didn't intend to introduce this Wuxia to you, but I heard that you have some trouble recently, so I specially brought them here today. In Texas, their power is still very good. As long as they say a word, those people won't dare to trouble you. After watching Shanghai and Wuxia finish talking, Prawalton came over. No need, do I need others to take revenge? Hearing Prawalton's words, Shanghai couldn't help but be stunned. He originally thought that Prawalton called them here to introduce him to business, but now it seems that she has a deeper meaning. But it's useless to say this now because Shanghai has decided to take revenge himself. Take revenge yourself? How are you going to do it? Hearing Shanghai's words, Prawalton asked with a puzzled look. Wait a minute. Seeing Prawalton's puzzled look, Shanghai wanted to say something, but at this moment his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that the person who called was none other than Belle. But at this time Belle seemed to be in a hurry. He only told Shanghai to go to the entrance of the SSR exhibition hall and watch the show, preferably far away, and then hung up the phone. Shanghai knows that this guy will definitely not say things without a reason. Let's go, I'll take you to watch the show. Since Belle said that there was a show to watch, Shanghai didn't hold back. He smiled and pulled Prawalton away. Regarding Shanghai and Prawalton leaving the exhibition hall, whether it was Shanghai's people or the people from the Walmart Group, they were not surprised. Because they all knew that Shanghai and Prawalton had a close relationship. Forget about dragging them out, even if they went to a hotel and booked a room, they would not be surprised. Where are we going? After Shanghai pulled her out of the exhibition hall, Prawalton asked in confusion. Follow me and you'll know. After talking to Prawalton, Shanghai quickly pulled her to the entrance of the SSR exhibition hall. It had been about half an hour since the last time he left, and in this half an hour the effect of the drug had just taken effect. Ouch, what's going on? At this time Roland Charlotte was sitting in the lounge, waiting for Willie Barton's news. He suddenly felt a little pain in his intestines. As the saying goes, a stomachache is not an illness, it's just that he didn't poop properly. In addition, he was a little nervous now. At first, he thought that it was because he was nervous so he wanted to go to the toilet. But later, when he felt his stomach hurt more and more, he felt that he might really need to go to the toilet. How could he care so much? So when his stomach growled again, he stood up and walked out of his room to go to the bathroom. But when he arrived in front of the bathroom, he saw that the bathroom was full of people. Ouch, boss. Do you need to go to the bathroom too? Suddenly, an employee walked over while clutching his stomach. He looked at Roland Charlotte and grinned. What's going on? Roland Charlotte was a little confused when he saw the employee's reaction. I don't know, it seems like the food we ate this morning wasn't clean, all the employees have diarrhea. This is my 4th time. Ouch, come out quickly, I can't hold it in anymore. When the employee heard Roland Charlotte's words, he suddenly squeezed his butt and quickly walked to the bathroom door. He knocked on the door but the person inside didn't even open it. Yes, Jiang Hai's attack was indiscriminate. The people who drank the bucket of water were mainly the employees of SSR. They prepared bottled water for the guests because these people weren't ordinary tourists. They were people who might buy their cows, so they naturally treated them well. The bottled water they drank was imported from Europe. The employees weren't allowed to drink the bottled water, so they drank the drugged bucket of water. Roland Charlotte was actually quite lucky because he had been sitting in his office for more than half an hour. But the employees were different. They had to explain and promote to these people, so they wasted a lot of saliva. Naturally, they were thirsty. So they drank more, and the more they drank, the faster they reacted. There was now a long line in front of the bathroom. Looking at these people, Roland Charlotte couldn't help but lick his lips. If this was in other countries, if a leader like him wanted to go to the toilet, even if the people inside didn't finish their business, some people would take the initiative to flatter him and give up their seats. However, this was the United States, a country that emphasized human rights. Therefore, no one would give up their seats for him. It was also somewhat embarrassing for him to fight for the bathroom with the employees. However, looking at these people who were having diarrhea, he felt that the idea that he could have held back for a while seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Now he seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He looked around and decided to go to the bathroom in the exhibition hall next door. So he tidied up his suit and walked out of the exhibition hall with a proud face. But at this time Jiang Hai and Prawalton also came over. They immediately saw Roland Charlotte, so they knew each other. He's the one who wants to mess with you? Prawalton pointed at Roland Charlotte in surprise. Hey, it's him. Look at my revenge. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai smiled, then wrinkled his nose and took a few steps back. His extraordinary sense of smell smelled something that shouldn't be smelled. Although Prawalton didn't smell anything, she also took a step back because she believed in Jiang Hai. At this moment, the sound of a trolley came from a distance, and on the trolley, there was a pile of stinky things, emitting a smell. When the pedestrians on the road smelled this smell, they subconsciously moved away, then looked at the cowboy who was pushing the trolley with a puzzled face. Looking at this cowboy, Jiang Hai grinned because he knew that this cowboy was Bell, but Bell didn't wear his own set of clothes. Instead, he changed into Willie Barton's original clothes, a shabby cowboy suit, and the bandage on his right arm was exactly the same, but the low brim of his hat exposed his existence. As the trolley got closer and closer, Roland Charlotte had just walked out of the exhibition hall when he smelled the stench. Seeing the trolley rushing towards him, he was scared out of his wits, and the trolley was directly pushed towards him. Oh my God! Roland Charlotte, who had been focusing most of his energy on fighting against his intestines, screamed in fright when he saw the cart coming towards him. He wanted to run away, but as soon as he moved, he heard a long sound of a flute coming from the lower part of his body, followed by a cracking sound. He felt that his pants had become heavier without him realizing it. More importantly, after eating the croton seeds, the yellow liquid instantly flowed down his trousers. But before anyone could notice that he had been scared out of his wits, Roland Charlotte heard a loud sound coming from the lower part of his body, followed by a cracking sound. He felt that his pants had become heavier. More importantly, after eating the croton seeds, the yellow liquid instantly flowed down his trousers. The trolley was already pushed over. Without saying a word, the pile of human, cow, and some unknown creatures, which could not be described because it was too disgusting, was poured directly on his body. Then Jiang Hai saw Bell pretend to be very panicked. After apologizing in a thick Texas accent, he quickly squeezed out of the crowd and disappeared, leaving Roland Charlotte standing in the middle of a pile of feces. Roland Charlotte was still pooping on the side. For a moment, the smell of himself and the smell of cow dung made everyone in the area run away. The nearby exhibition halls also closed their doors. It was as if Roland Charlotte was the only person left in the world. Of course, there were also a lot of surveillance cameras. Willie Barton, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. Looking at the pile of excrement on his body, face, and even the corners of his mouth, he shouted loudly while standing in the middle of the pile of excrement. As soon as he opened his mouth, a few flies flew to the right place, causing him to retch instantly. At the same time he lost his balance and fell in the middle of the pile of excrement. At the same time new excrement was constantly being created behind him. Ugh, this is your revenge. No, I have to go back first, it's too disgusting. Prawalton looked at the scene in front of her from a distance, her eyes full of surprise. Jiang Hai was really too careless and disgusting. She was about to throw up. Looking at Prawalton running away, Jiang Hai scratched his head. He did not expect the effect to be so good. Chapter 695. To use a phrase from the game, the effect was outstanding. Although he didn't know what outstanding meant. Looking at Roland Shalater, who was vomiting and pooping at the same time, Jiang Hai smiled wickedly and returned to his exhibition hall. He felt pretty good about his revenge. After a while, Bell came back and changed back into his own clothes. That Willie Barton had been knocked out by him, and the whole thing had been completed without anyone noticing. Jiang Hai was quite pleased with Bell. Having such a capable general had indeed saved him a lot of trouble. He picked up his phone and transferred $100,000 to Jiang Hai's bank account. It wasn't a payment but a reward. After all, Jiang Hai wasn't short of money. Although Jiang Hai didn't say it explicitly, Bell naturally knew what the money was about. He smiled at Jiang Hai and then went back to taking care of the cows. It was said that no man could get rich without a windfall, and no horse could get fat without feeding at night. Right now Bell probably hoped that more people would come to make trouble for Jiang Hai. Not long after Prawalton came back, he left with his team. They still wanted to check out the other exhibition halls. Without the cow dung in front of the door, a lot of people came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall this time. It was indeed because Jiang Hai's cows were really good. They didn't need to be dissected, but they could tell that the cows were big, muscular, and had beautiful hair. There was no mucus in their eyes and they were quite bright. Their teeth were also very well developed, very white and very neat. They didn't have bad breath or stuck teeth. In the eyes of almost all farm owners, such cows were the best breeding cattle. In the eyes of the restaurant owners and butchers, they were extremely precious and good breeds. Yesterday there was a terrible stench. Today there was no smell and it was indeed much more comfortable. And most importantly, Jiang Hai's cows didn't smell much different. It was almost the same as the smell of a strong man who had just finished playing basketball. There was a slight smell of sweat, but if one wasn't very close to the cows, it would be almost undetectable. As soon as the air circulated, it would disappear. Many people came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall to ask about the cows. Although Jiang Hai and his team didn't plan to expand their sales and do business with these people, they didn't know who among these people were judges, so they could only receive all of them. Everyone spent the morning busy. At noon the tourists went to eat and Jiang Hai ordered takeout. The brand of pizza that Jiang Hai ordered was Fireside Pizza. It was a local pizza brand in Texas, but it was in Dallas. It was also the only one of the 10 best pizzas in the United States that wasn't in New York or Chicago. This was not a very famous old store. It had only been established for about 10 years. In the beginning it was run in a dilapidated hut in Dallas. Later the store became very popular and opened many branches. There was one nearby. The pizza in this restaurant was baked by a charcoal stove, and there were many flavors to choose from. The best ones were chicken sausage pizza, spiced roast chicken pizza, prosciutto pizza, and Parmesan pizza. As for the best pizza in the United States, it was in Brooklyn. Pizza Hut, which was famous in China, wasn't even on the list in the United States. Pizza Hut was the best pizza in the United States. The best pizza in the United States was the less famous pizza. Jiang Hai and the others were all big eaters. One person could finish a 13-inch pizza, so these things were not a problem. Jiang Hai ordered pure meat pizzas, prosciutto pizza, and a Texas-style pizza. Although Jiang Hai didn't like the people here, the pizza here was still very good. There was thick beef and thick cheese. As soon as they opened it, the smell of cheese made their noses twitch unconsciously. It was really fragrant and very strong. Grabbing a piece, they didn't need to say much. 4 large pizzas entered Jiang Hai's and the others' stomachs at a speed visible to the naked eye. Of course, eating pizza was definitely indispensable with cola. Pizza and cola were the real perfect match. After eating and drinking, everyone sat on the chairs and enjoyed this rare leisure time. In the afternoon it was time to get busy again. However, after Jiang Hai lay down for a while, he remembered that he still had to call Du Feynman. Therefore, he told Robbins Garcia to take a look at the exhibition hall first before he went to the side to broadcast the news to Du Feynman. There was a time difference between the United States and Dubai. Dubai was 8 hours faster than the United States. Now when Jiang Hai called, it was past 12 o'clock. In Dubai, it was almost 9 o'clock in the evening. Of course, people like Du Feynman wouldn't rest at 9 o'clock in the evening. When Zhang Hai called, he was high. The electronic dance music next to him almost made Zhang Hai's ears hurt. "Hello Zhang, why are you calling me at this time?" Du Feynman said excitedly to Zhang Hai while covering his ears. "Find a quiet place where there is no one and listen to me," Zhang Hai said loudly when he heard Du Feynman's voice. After Du Feynman heard Zhang Hai's words, he heard footsteps and the sound of the door closing. Then, the music on the other side of the phone instantly became softer. At this time Du Feynman also asked Zhang Hai, "Well, I'm out. What's the matter?" When he heard Zhang Hai's words, he also felt that Zhang Hai should have something to say to him, so it was necessary to listen carefully. "It's like this. Today, a man named Luke Sean came to buy grass from me. He has his own testing center. He said that you sent my grass to his testing center, and even sent it to famous testing centers all over the world. So, he knows that the composition of my grass is very unusual, so he came to buy grass from me today. I just want to ask, what do you think? If you don't trust my grass, you can use the testing center of Dubai's royal family. I'm very unlucky that you did this. You know, I don't want too many people to notice me." Hearing that Du Feynman had come to a quiet place, Zhang Hai said slowly. In fact, this matter was indeed a little troublesome for Zhang Hai, but it was not as troublesome as he said. After all, he was still building his brand. However, Du Feynman actually let the grass out. It was no wonder that Zhang Hai scared him. "What? I didn't know about this. The grass you gave me, I first sent it to the Royal Testing Center. After the composition was determined, I didn't do any more testing. What's going on? How could it be from my place?" Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman was even more surprised. He knew that in this world, Zhang Hai's grass was the most precious treasure in the cattle industry. If Zhang Hai's grass was leaked out, people all over the world would know. Even if it was for the sake of the local reputation, Zhang Hai would not sell the grass to him alone. However, Zhang Hai would not take less money from selling grass. In this case, wouldn't it mean that he was the only one who would suffer losses? Zhang Hai was also aware of this, so he was not in a hurry. He did not have to worry about selling his grass, but Du Feynman was very worried. "You can check it yourself. The other party clearly told me that the grass was leaked out from your place. There is a traitor among you." Listening to Du Feynman's panicked words, Zhang Hai did not care whether he was acting or not. He just wanted to scare him. "Okay, I understand. I will give you an answer as soon as possible." Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman's mood did not seem to be very good. "By the way, you'd better stop using helicopters to drive the cows in your ranch. No matter how quiet the helicopter is, it's still noisy. It's easy to frighten the cows and cause them to exercise excessively. In this way, the original marble lines in their bodies will disappear. I think you know what marble lines are, right? They're fat. When the fat turns into lean meat, your cows will be useless. It's better to hire more people than to waste my grass and your cows." After Zhang Hai finished talking about the grass, he casually mentioned the helicopter and the cattle. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman was silent on the other side of the phone. "Okay, I understand. Thank you for your reminder, Zhang. You will always be my friend," Du Feynman said seriously after listening to Zhang Hai's words. "I am also willing to be the friend of a rich man. You can do as you see fit. Okay, I'm hanging up." Listening to Du Feynman's serious words, Zhang Hai also smiled. He knew that Du Feynman would solve this matter himself. After Zhang Hai hung up the phone, Du Feynman's originally gloomy face instantly became even gloomier. "Our grass leaked out. Do you know about this?" Du Feynman didn't even raise his head as he asked a middle-aged man behind him. This middle-aged man was the head of his bodyguards, or the head of the steward. He usually assisted Du Feynman, so he knew about Du Feynman's affairs, such as the outflow of the pasture. I know a little." Hearing that Du Feynman was his man, this man was also a little flustered. However, his good character made him admit it. "Why didn't you tell me if you knew?" However, he did not expect that Du Feynman, who was usually very gentle, would suddenly go berserk at this time. He grabbed the ashtray behind him and directly smashed it on the middle-aged man's head. The middle-aged man saw Du Feynman's action but did not dodge. He allowed Du Feynman to smash his head. In an instant, the ashtray was smashed into pieces. A huge bloody wound appeared on his head. Blood was constantly flowing out, but he did not cover it. Instead, he continued to lower his head. Because this matter was carried out by Mr. Akita Masaki. He said that he did not trust Mr. Zhang's grass, so he needed to find another organization to test it and make a second confirmation. I think this is just a small matter. There is no need to inform you. Hearing Du Feimin's roar, this man continued to speak slowly, as if the person with the wound on his head was not him. Do you know how much money you have caused us to lose this time? That Akita Mango sent the forage grass to the testing institutions all over the world. In other words, the whole world now knows that Jianghai's manor has such magical forage grass. The nutrition in it can make beef cows grow marbled meat. Originally, these forage grass were ours, but now it's going to be distributed to the whole world. Do you know what this means? It means that our income has been halved. Even if a beef cow is sold for $50,000, a million cows would be $50 billion. And your opinion has caused me to lose $5 million. What do you think now? Grabbing the man's hair, Du Feimin made him look at his face. His eyes were spitting fire and he really wanted to kill him. Hearing Du Feimin's words, this man could not help but feel a little surprised. He did not expect things to turn out this way. The great Mr. Du Feimin Weha Muhammad bin Rashid Al Maktoum, I didn't know that you were sure this kind of grass would have this kind of effect. In my opinion, Mr. Jiang is more like a swindler than a person we can work with. Looking at Du Feimin, this middle-aged man decided to tell the truth. He also did not think that Jianghai's grass would have any effect. Otherwise he would definitely not have agreed. Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Didn't the testing report of our royal family state clearly? Hearing that this man still dared to talk back, Du Feimin also shouted loudly. He was about to go crazy. That was all money, a lot of money. What if the inspection center's report is wrong? You are the ones who will suffer losses. However, the middle-aged man still didn't think that he had done anything wrong, so he said calmly. Hearing his words, Du Feimin went up and kicked him down. This guy really made him too angry. He really wanted to kill him now. However, although this person was not a member of the royal family, he still had some of the royal family's power. The reason why he followed him was actually because the current chief wanted to keep an eye on him. He could beat him up but he could not kill him. This was also the thing that made Du Feimin the most angry now. Pass down my order immediately. Get all the grass back. I hope it's not too late. As for Akita Masaki, arrest him for commercial espionage. Those Japanese, arrest all of them. Bastards, bastards, bastards. Stroking his hair, Du Feimin knew that he had to calm down. Now he had to deal with how to clean up this mess. Jianghai's grass was exposed and it did have some impact on Jianghai. However, he did not have to worry about the sales of his grass, but what about his own side? He could have taken all the grass for himself, but now he had to give it up. His heart ached. Chapter 696. For some people, it was very important for everyone to earn money together, and harmony brought wealth. But for some people, they did not need to make money peacefully. They could make their own decisions. For example, the situation in Dubai. Whether it was their tourism industry or their oil, the royal family had the final say in everything. It was that simple. There was no democracy, no one could interfere with them, and there were no messy things. Everything was decided by them. They could not give up any benefits and keep everything for themselves. They had such a habit. It was the same for oil and it was the same for beef. Since they had already reached an agreement with Jianghai, then these things were theirs. It was as simple as that. Now that this news was leaked out, it was almost like taking money out of their pockets. It would be strange if they didn't get angry. Hearing Du Feimin's words, his subordinates immediately took action. At this time, in their desert ranch, Akita Masaki looked at the few pages of reports in his hands. His face was full of disbelief. From the beginning, he did not believe that cows could grow marbled beef after eating Jianghai's pasture. Yes, he did not believe it. In fact, no one in their right mind would believe it, especially those who raised cattle themselves. Take Wagyu as an example. It was extremely difficult to make a cow grow marbled patterns, especially beautiful marbled patterns. It almost required 1 to 2 or even 1 to 1 to raise beef cows. The amount of exercise, the speed, the route, and even the posture of the cow every day had to be calculated. At the same time, letting the cow drink red wine was to relax. Giving the cow massages was to make the marbled beef grow according to their imagination. Only such a grown Wagyu could have special marbled patterns. It was also Japan's absolute God-grade beef in the beef industry. It was 5A grade beef. But now, someone suddenly came and said that what they were doing was wrong. It was actually very easy to raise marbled beef. They only needed to feed him grass. Which normal person would believe this? They worked so hard to raise their beef, but they couldn't do it just by feeding him grass? Wasn't this bullshit? This was the same as what Qiushan Mengwu knew about the Dali pill in Wuxia. It was definitely a lie. But the biggest problem was that Du Feynman believed this without a doubt. This was awkward. So, he had been thinking of ways to expose Jiang Hai. At the end of last month, Jiang Hai's first batch of pasture was sent over. Du Feynman directly asked people to carefully select 200,000 beef cows for testing. As the commander here, it was not difficult for Akita Masaki to get the pasture. Thus, he convinced the people around Du Feynman to send out these forage grasses to the testing centers he knew of. These testing centers were from Japan, Korea, the United States, and even Europe. It was not that he did not believe the test results from Dubai, but it was hard for him to convince himself that it was true. And Du Feynman's follower was actually sent by the royal family to monitor him. After all, before the current chief succeeded to the throne, Du Feynman also had the right of succession, and his position was not low. Moreover, he had also obtained a large amount of wealth from his grandfather and father, so it was very normal to send someone to keep an eye on him. Du Feynman also had no intention of resisting. Bringing someone with him could make the chief feel at ease. In his opinion, this kind of thing actually had more advantages than disadvantages. Compared to political power, he was more interested in doing business. This was also the reason why he did not resist. This person was only in charge of monitoring, but he himself did not know much about beef farming. Compared to Jiang Hai, that arrogant Wuxia person, he preferred an extremely humble Japanese person. So when Akita Masaki said this, he agreed. However, he did not expect that his agreement would almost cost him his life. Du Feynman would not be able to kill him. But if he reported this matter, it would definitely be reported, and then the chief would definitely not spare him. The loss of tens of billions of dollars that year was not something that a small monitor like him could decide. Looking at the test reports in his hand, Akita Masaki roared in disbelief. This is impossible, this is impossible, this is absolutely impossible. How can this guy's pasture be so nutritious? This must be a mistake. These reports were the test reports of the pasture he sent out. The inspectors were also from Japan and Korea, which he trusted the most. But the contents were almost exactly the same as the test reports here in Dubai. This did not mean that Jiang Hai's pasture was good. It just meant that the testing agencies all over the world were all broken because this was impossible. He just did not believe it. Bang! But just as he was struggling alone here, the door of his room was kicked open, and then a group of Dubai soldiers poured in from the outside. Looking at these Dubai soldiers, Akita Masaki was a little confused. He was very familiar with these Dubai soldiers. According to Du Feynman, these Dubai soldiers were here to protect the safety of this place. After all, there were still some dangers in the desert, but these people who were here to protect were sometimes people who wanted to kill. Mr. Akita, you are temporarily detained because you are suspected of a commercial espionage case. During this time you can't leave here in our sight. Wait for the Dubai police to come and pick you up. Otherwise we can't guarantee your safety. Looking at the stunned Akita Masaki, one of these soldiers said to Akita Masaki in a deep voice. Hearing his words, Akita Masaki was also dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Tonight in Dubai was destined to be a sleepless night. Around 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, the Dubai police helicopter flew over the ranch and took away all the Japanese people, including Akita Masaki, and arrested them in the Dubai police station on the charge of commercial espionage. What awaited them was the Japanese. Well, it depended on whether the Japanese were willing to pay for these people. However, the matter of Jiang Hai's pasture was still spread out. Although they immediately pursued it, Dubai only recovered about 30 pasture. These pasture were all from Europe. Europeans looked down on Asians. Wuxia, Japan and South Korea were the same. Therefore, these European testing agencies did not rush to test the pasture after receiving it. Instead, they were busy with their own matters and would wait until they had time. However, this time made them miss an opportunity to open a new door to the world of beef cattle. On the contrary, the testing agencies of other countries had obtained quite amazing news. Among them, Japan and South Korea were the most active. However, if they wanted to contact Jiang Hai, they would need an opportunity. On the other side, Jiang Hai was very calm. After the phone call, he didn't care about the upheaval in Dubai. It had nothing to do with him. He was still looking after his exhibition hall. There was nothing to do in the afternoon. Jiang Hai was also very happy here. After returning in the evening, he specially celebrated with Cheryl and Prawalton. Today's victory was a little disgusting, but it was really cool. Especially when he thought of Roland Chalad's appearance yesterday, Jiang Hai felt so good from head to toe. Especially the scene of him lying in the poop, vomiting and pooping, it was really picturesque. However, on the other side, Roland Chalad really wanted to die at this time. Today he made the biggest scene in his life. After doing that in the morning, he immediately left to take a bath. No, it could be said that he took a bath for the whole day. His skin was about to be scrubbed off, and his hair was about to be washed off, but he still felt as if he was exuding a stench all over his body. In addition, his stomach kept growling. After taking a bath, he immediately went to the toilet. It was really torturous. Until 10 o'clock in the evening, Roland Charlotte looked like he had just eaten something he shouldn't have eaten, such as poison or something like that, and then had sex with 10 women. His face was almost peeled off. His whole body was swollen with blisters. His face was dark, his eyes were blue, and his face was pale. To be honest, he didn't even need to put on makeup if he wanted to shoot a zombie movie. He could directly appear on screen. Dragging his body that was about to fall apart, he slowly made his way to the bed in his room. Then he laid down on the bed. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything for the entire day and only had diarrhea. When he recalled the scene from this morning, he wanted to vomit again. "Mr. Roland, are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital?" Looking at his appearance, the female assistant next to him hesitated and asked him. Hearing her words, Roland Charlotte shook his head. He wasn't sure if he could walk to the hospital. "Did you find out what happened?" Squinting his eyes, Roland Charlotte asked the assistant behind him. What are you talking about?" Hearing his words, the female assistant hesitated for a moment and asked. "Tell me what you found out." Roland Charlotte glanced at the female assistant. Usually, Roland Charlotte found this female assistant with a big chest very pleasing to the eye. Why was her IQ not enough today? "What do you think I'm asking about?" "Oh, about our employees' diarrhea. The report has come out. It seems to have nothing to do with the bottled water company, because the remaining water was tested. The bacteria in the water did not exceed the limit, and the quality of the water was also fine. We also ruled out the addition of chemical ingredients, so..." Hearing Roland Charlotte's slightly dissatisfied words, the assistant immediately said. Hearing her words, Roland Charlotte couldn't help but be stunned. He was sure that this matter must be Jiang Hai's doing. Originally, he thought that if it was Jiang Hai who poisoned the water, he would directly call the police to arrest him, but what's the situation now? No problem? What the F***ck? Listening to the assistant's words, Roland Charlotte couldn't help but say angrily. "We also found Willie Barton, but he doesn't remember how he lost the trolley. He only remembers that when he was pushing the trolley here, someone suddenly hit him on the back of his head, and then he fainted. When he woke up, it was already afternoon." Looking at the report in her hand, the female assistant hesitated for a moment and said to Roland Charlotte in front of her. "Who the F***ck eat more? This bastard, he must have done it, it must have been him." Hearing that there was no evidence, Roland Charlotte was about to go crazy. When did he suffer such a big loss? If it was an ordinary ****, what could he do without evidence? But the problem is that Jiang Hai is not an ordinary ****. This is awkward. It is impossible for him to use his own power to deal with Jiang Hai. After all, this is the United States, a world where everything is about evidence and freedom. If he dares to frame Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai is not so easy to frame, but if they are found out, no one can save them. This is the biggest difference between the two, the difference in power. Now even if Roland Charlotte knows that today's matter is definitely related to Jiang Hai, there is no evidence. He can't do anything to Jiang Hai. When he thought of this, he felt that he was going crazy. "Tomorrow, no, go and inform all the cowboys in our company. Tomorrow we will flood Jiang Hai's exhibition hall with cow dung." After thinking about it, it is impossible to take revenge on Jiang Hai officially, so he has to use his own way. Thinking of his embarrassing appearance today, he couldn't help but gnash his teeth, but when he gritted his teeth, he felt as if there was something in his mouth and he couldn't help retching. "No, I have to brush my teeth again." Waving his hand, Roland Charlotte ran into the bathroom. Looking at Roland Charlotte's appearance, the assistant wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, he went to convey Roland Charlotte's order. At this time, Jiang Hai is also prepared for his revenge. In the evening, he specially went to the person in charge of this exhibition and spent $200,000 to strengthen the security around his exhibition hall. This is to prevent the other party from using the same trick as the other day. Jiang Hai is rich and he is not afraid to compete with others. He doesn't care about money. He just watched Jiang Hai spend $200,000. Naturally, the organizer here has nothing to say. He immediately sent more people to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. Tomorrow, 40 security guards will be responsible for the security of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. Since there is no way to coexist peacefully, they will hurt each other. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, after Jiang Hai and the others sent the cows to the exhibition hall, the 40 security guards arrived. Jiang Hai asked Bell to command them while he waited for Roland Charlotte to arrive. However, Roland Charlotte didn't come, but someone else did. Chapter 697. Mr. Jiang Hai, we meet again. Luke Shan walked over with his son and said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "Oh, you're here." Seeing Luke Shan and Anthony Shan walking over, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Indeed, he had forgotten about the father and son, but now that he saw them, he remembered and greeted them with a smile. "I wonder what you've thought about what we talked about yesterday?" Luke Shan looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. For them, it was very important to be on good terms with Jiang Hai and get Jiang Hai's forage. "Oh, I asked yesterday. I can sell the forage to you, but the price isn't low." Listening to their words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said seriously. Indeed, he could get a lot of money just by selling grass. Originally, he wasn't too interested in territory, but now if the business of selling grass was good, then wouldn't he be able to expand his territory? In Winthrop, there were many small and medium-sized ranches around Jiang Hai. If he merged with them and only raised grass instead of cattle, it would be enough for Jiang Hai to make a lot of money. This was also the first time that Jiang Hai had some ideas about territory. "We naturally understand the price. Your forage is a monopoly, so the price is still set by you. As long as it's acceptable, I'll buy it." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luke Shan said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also thought about it. "I'll also tell you the bottom line. The forage I sold to Du Feynman was $200 per ton, but he was responsible for the transportation. If you're responsible for the transportation, I'll also give you $200 per ton." After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai said directly to Luke Shan. Of course, Jiang Hai's words were not true. How could Jiang Hai sell the forage to Du Feynman for $200 per ton? It was $150. However, for Luke Shan, it would be a waste if Jiang Hai did not earn his money. He would not be polite to him. Listening to Jiang Hai's price, Luke Shan couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. Ordinary pasture, even the best pasture, would only cost about $12 per ton. After all, this was just pasture, not gold bars. Many northern cities, such as Montana, would also have snow during winter. At this time, the ranches there would need to buy pasture. Otherwise, what would the livestock eat during winter? He had thought that Jiang Hai would only offer 5 times the price, but to his surprise, Jiang Hai demanded $200, which wasn't cheap at all. "Let me do the math for you. Take my Angus cattle as an example. After all, they're small to medium-sized breeds, and each cow eats about 10 to 20 kilograms of fodder a day, which is 3,650 to 7,300 kilograms a year. If you use the price of the fodder, it'll be about $700 to $1,400. But I can guarantee that you'll grow 5% of premium marbled beef. A cow weighs 750 kilograms, and there'll be 450 kilograms left after slaughter. 5% of that is 22.5 kilograms. 1 pound of premium grade A beef is worth nearly $17,000 based on the purchase price, which is $375 per pound. The rest of the beef will also be of premium grade, which is $130 per pound, and definitely won't be any less than that. In that case, you can sell the cow for nearly $50,000 including the skin and other parts. If you're rearing a big cow, the price will be different. But for this cow, you only spent about $1,000 on it, plus a year's worth of labor and fodder from me." Looking at Luke Shan in front of him, Jiang Hai spoke slowly. He wasn't worried that Luke Shan wouldn't buy it. He had a monopoly on this kind of forage. What was a monopoly? It meant that he was the only one in the world who had this kind of forage. If Luke Shan wanted to make more money, he had to cooperate with him. $200. To be honest, this is really expensive, but I can accept this price. But the transportation. To be honest, the transportation of forage isn't cheap. He hesitated for a moment. In fact, as Jiang Hai said, if he could really calculate it that way, an Angus cow could bring him $50,000 in income. After deducting the cost, there would be at least $48,000 left. Luke Shan himself was a famous rancher in Texas. His cattle were bred by himself, so there was no need to buy them. There was also a pitiful lack of manpower. The cowboys here didn't earn as much as Jiang Hai's cowboys. As for the $700 Jiang Hai said for forage, Luke Shan didn't believe it. Since he wanted the cows to eat this kind of forage, he would definitely let them eat until they were full. 20 kilograms a day was a must. That didn't mean that his annual consumption would be about $1,400. Other than that, all the money he made here was net profit. After deducting taxes, it seemed that he could make a lot of money. But as a businessman he had to bargain for everything. This was the most important problem. How about this? As you know, I set up a company called Soaring Dragon. It's mainly to promote the brands in my manor, beef and seafood. But I also do logistics. If you want to buy, I can give you a discount of $5 per ton of forage. You can use my logistics. It's about $205 per ton. I'll help you send it to the big city you specify, and you can send a car to pick it up. Hearing what Luke Shan said, Jiang Hai decided to give in a little and help his company. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luke Shan thought for a moment. Indeed, Jiang Hai's proposal was really tempting. After hesitating for a while, he nodded gently. I can accept this price and I can also accept using your logistics. But how much of this grass can you provide? Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke Shan seemed to have made up his mind about something. He said seriously to Jiang Hai, I have nearly 30,000 cows in my manor. Actually, it's more than 20,000 cows. The daily consumption is very important. When I sell the grass, I sell the grass that they can't finish. But most of the grass was bought by Du Feimin. Now that I have leftovers, I can probably provide the consumption of 100,000 cows. Seeing that Luke Shan agreed, Jiang Hai also nodded. He didn't like people who were too long-winded. He didn't have to sell his grass. 100,000 cows. A cow's annual consumption was $1,400. 10,000 cows would be $14 million, and 100,000 cows would be $140 million. Unknowingly, he was going to talk about a big business deal. Unfortunately, this didn't fit Luke Shan's idea. Can't you sell 100,000 cows? Seeing Luke Shan shake his head, Jiang Hai knew that he wasn't going to buy everything. Then tell me how many cows. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's mentality was very calm. He didn't care if he couldn't sell the grass for 100,000 cows. Just like what they said, it was just grass. Jiang Hai didn't care much about money. I want 1,000,000 cows. But in the next second, Luke Shan's words almost killed Jiang Hai. Well, it turned out that he didn't think 100,000 cows was too much. He thought 100,000 cows was too little. He had to admit that this guy was really ambitious. 1,000,000 cows. Wasn't that about the same size as Du Feimin's ranch? It seemed that this guy was really rich. At least he wasn't someone Luke could compare to. No, I'm really sorry. I only have 100,000 cows. I'll go back and think of a way. If I can squeeze out some more, I'll give it to you. After hearing Luke Shan's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. 100,000 cows were already a lot. 1,000,000 cows? Although he might be able to get so much grass, Jiang Hai felt that he would have some trouble in the future if he gave Luke so much grass. Jiang Hai didn't really want to raise cows now. He felt that he would become rich just by selling grass. After all, those cows only made a few $1 billion a year. If he sold grass, Jiang Hai felt that his annual income might reach several $1 billion. But fortunately he still thought about it. He shook his head and rejected Luke Shan's proposal. That's a pity. 100,000 cows it is. This is also the initial tentative cooperation between us. I hope we can cooperate happily. Seeing Jiang Hai reject him, Luke Shan couldn't help but think highly of Jiang Hai. He knew that Jiang Hai sold 1,000,000 cows of grass to Du Feimin, and he was sure that the price he offered was higher than Du Feimin's. In such a situation where there was money to be made, he still insisted on his contract spirit. This was commendable. It was also because of this that he thought highly of Jiang Hai. This man could remain calm in the face of money. He was really good. But in fact he was thinking too much. The reason why Jiang Hai didn't transfer Du Feimin's quantity to him was that Jiang Hai's most important life-saving oil futures were obtained from Du Feimin. Secondly, he believed that Du Feimin would also raise the price once the price was announced. When did the Dubai tycoon care about such trivial matters? What a joke. Happy cooperation. Seeing that Luke Shan agreed, Jiang Hai shook hands with him and then said with a chuckle. The next thing would be left to the lawyers of both sides to discuss. Jiang Hai called Moses Adams. After learning about the contract of $100 million a year, Moses Adams also expressed his intention to come as soon as possible. He knew that Jiang Hai wouldn't treat him badly after negotiating such a business deal. At the same time, he also brought people from Soaring Dragon Logistics, which was another expansion project of Soaring Dragon Logistics. Of course, this was all for later and had nothing to do with the current situation. Jiang Hai come out. But at this time, something related to Jiang Hai happened. For example, Roland Shalater finally came. As soon as he reached an agreement with Luke Shan, there was a commotion outside the exhibition hall. After hearing this sound, Jiang Hai walked out of the exhibition hall to take a look. At this time, outside the exhibition hall, the security guards were already fighting with the people brought by Roland Starlit. Normally, when the security guards saw the cart full of cow dung, they would have already run away. Who would fight them head-on? But yesterday Jiang Hai spent $200,000 to find these people. Although the organizer and the security company received $50,000, the remaining 20 people knew that if they could withstand the cow dung attack, they could get $5,000. $5,000 a month was considered a middle-class family in the United States, not to mention that it was only for one day. So even if they knew that it was cow dung, even if they knew that the smell was strong, they still rushed up and pushed the cowboys, not letting them pass. Seeing that his men couldn't break through the defensive line, Roland Starlit was filled with hatred and anger. At this time he was much better than last night. After taking a shower, he went to a nearby private hospital to get in 4 drip and take anti-diarrhea medicine. Although his condition was still not very good, at least he could stand here now. Looking at Jiang Hai coming out, he really hated him to the core. Roland Starlit felt that yesterday was the most humiliating day in his life. He had never been so humiliated before and probably would never be again. Now that he saw the culprit Jiang Hai come out, he almost went crazy. Oh, it's you. You're so free, coming here early in the morning, looking for trouble? Looking at the cowboys and trolleys that were blocked outside, Jiang Hai looked at Roland Starlit with a smile on his face. The conflict here naturally attracted a lot of people's attention. But because the cow dung was so smelly, not many people came to watch, only the security guards and the cowboys still insisted. You bastard, you dare to say that what happened yesterday had nothing to do with you? Pointing at Jiang Hai, Roland Starlit roared angrily. Oh, I don't understand what you're talking about. Looking at the angry Roland Starlit, Jiang Hai gently picked his ear and said with an annoying face. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Roland Starlit was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He had completely forgotten what kind of attitude he had yesterday. Jiang Hai, at most, could be regarded as restoring his situation yesterday. You don't understand? Okay, I'll let you understand. Let's go. Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent face, Roland Starlit roared. As his voice fell, the cowboys on the other side began to exert their strength, trying to break through the security circle. Stop them. But fortunately, Bell's reaction was faster. He also shouted loudly, and the cowboys and security guards on both sides fought again. Okay, what are you guys doing? But at this moment, suddenly a familiar voice sounded behind Jiang Hai, and then Jiang Hai saw Luke Shan coming out with a gloomy face. When he saw Luke Shan, Roland Starlit's face also showed a look of disbelief. He never thought that Luke Shan would be here. Chapter 698. Looks like Luke Shan is just like what Pula Walton said. He has quite a reputation here. Looking at Luke Shan, who stood in front of him and made everyone silent, Jiang Hai whispered in his heart. Then he took a step back and handed the venue over to Luke Shan. Now he would be in charge of it. Mr. Shan. Looking at Luke Shan, Roland Starlit hesitated for a moment, then called out. If his SSR company was a giant in the eyes of the cowboy, then Luke Shan was a giant in their eyes. He was so big that they could hardly compete with him. As soon as Luke Shan came out, Roland Starlit was confused. He couldn't understand how Jiang Hai got involved with Luke Shan. Shouldn't this purist Texan be on their side? Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm sorry for scaring you. Luke Shan looked at Jiang Hai and nodded. It's okay if you know these people, then I'll leave this place to you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled, then waved his hand. Bell left with the security guards. But this time no one stopped the cowboys and they didn't dare to push the cow dung forward. They had heard of Luke Shan before. You're a disgrace to Texas, get out of here. Looking at the cowboy in front of him, Roland Shan shouted. After hearing Roland Shan's words, the cowboy glanced at Roland Shan. After finding that Roland Shan didn't say anything, they left dejectedly. Are you kidding me? Is your life more important than your money? Of course Luke Shan wouldn't kill them. But if they offended Luke Shan in Texas, would they still be able to survive here? Compared to their future jobs, the second half of their lives. The small amount of money that Roland Starlit had given him, plus his own anger, had long disappeared. Originally, in their eyes, Jiang Hai was just an ordinary foreigner with some money, but they couldn't understand how Jiang Hai connected with Luke Shan. This was really a bit puzzling, but it didn't mean that they dared to disobey Luke Shan's words. After hearing Luke Shan's words and seeing that Roland Starlit didn't say anything, They all left with their tails between their legs. In an instant, only Luke Shawn, his son Anthony Shawn, and Roland Shalit were left on the street. Luke Shawn looked at Roland Shalit, then slowly walked in front of him with his son. "Mr. Shawn?" Roland Shalit looked at Luke Shawn and swallowed hard, then said anxiously. "You don't need to tell me this, I only believe what I see. Now, immediately apologize to Mr. Jiang Hai, or SSR Corporation will change owners." Luke Shawn waved his hand at Roland Shalit, stopping him from speaking. He said in a serious tone. "What? Mr. Shawn, you can't." Listening to what Luke Shawn said, Roland Shalit said with a horrified expression. "Now, immediately, do you need me to say anything else?" Unfortunately, Luke Shawn didn't give him a chance to explain. When Luke Shawn talked to Jiang Hai, he was very polite because Jiang Hai could bring him profits. Like Jiang Hai said, he provided fodder for 100,000 cows. Excluding the money that Jiang Hai earned, the cows were worth about $5 billion. After selling them and paying the taxes, he would have at least $3 billion left. How much was SSR Corporation's total market value? Not to mention 100,000 cows now, what about 200,000 cows in the future? 300,000 cows? 1 million cows? How many SSR corporations could he buy? This guy actually dared to offend Jiang Hai. He was simply courting death. Luke Shawn didn't ask why things turned out this way, nor did he ask what the cause and effect was. He only knew that he couldn't be cut off from his source of income. He had to obtain Jiang Hai's forgiveness. Aye. Roland Shalit couldn't help but be dumbfounded as he looked at Luke Shawn. Tears kept welling up in his eyes. Roland Shalit was not a sissy, nor was he a man with a weak heart, but he really felt wronged at this moment. Why did he have to apologize after being messed with so badly yesterday? There was no justice in this world. Roland Shalit couldn't say anything else as he looked at the aggressive Luke Shawn in front of him. But it was impossible for him to apologize. In the end, he broke down and ran outside after screaming. "Father, should I call the people from SSR Corporation to apologize?" Watching Roland Shalit leave, Anjane Shawn frowned and said to Luke Shawn. Hearing his words, Luke Shawn narrowed his eyes. He looked back at Jiang Hai's exhibition hall and found that Jiang Hai wasn't there. It seemed that his sincerity wasn't enough. "I'll leave it to you." Luke Shawn looked at his son and said faintly. He patted his son's shoulder and walked into Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. He saw Jiang Hai sitting there playing with his phone and walked over with a smile. Luke Shawn looked at Jiang Hai with a smile and said slowly to Jiang Hai, "The matter outside has been resolved. I'll give Mr. Jiang Hai a satisfactory answer. It's my fault for letting Jiang Hai have such unpleasant memories here. If there's time, I'll bring Mr. Jiang Hai around to have some fun. What do you think?" He was very interested in Jiang Hai. To be exact, he was interested in Jiang Hai's pasture and the formula of the pasture. It was impossible for anyone who was close to Jiang Hai to not be interested in Jiang Hai's secrets. However, if Jiang Hai didn't say anything, they couldn't get to the bottom of it. If they really made Jiang Hai angry, it would be disastrous. Go out to have fun? Forget it. I need to focus more on the competition. I'll have to wait for the next opportunity. Looking at Luke Shawn in front of him, Jiang Hai wasn't going to go out and play with him. Who knows if he has any traps or something like that. Jiang Hai was more focused on the beef cattle show. His goal was to get first place. If that's the case, then it's really a pity. But Mr. Jiang Hai's cow is really amazing. I wish Mr. Jiang Hai a good ranking in this beef cattle exhibition. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't want to go, Luke Shawn didn't force him. After all, he knew that he wasn't very familiar with Jiang Hai, so he said with a smile. "Thank you for your kind words." Looking at Luke Shawn, Jiang Hai responded with a smile. After the two exchanged a few words, Luke Shawn also left. After they left, only Luke Shawn returned home. As for Anthony Shawn, he went to the SSR company. Just like they said, this matter wasn't over yet. The SSR company was very careful with Anthony Shawn's arrival. After knowing the purpose of Anthony Shawn's visit, SSR's largest shareholder, Babbitt Shalit, wanted to kill his little bastard. After sending Anthony Shawn off, he immediately called Roland Shalit. Ignoring the aggrieved Roland Shalit on the other side of the phone, Babbitt Shalit went to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall and apologized to Jiang Hai on behalf of SSR. He also made a promise that if Jiang Hai needed anything in the future, they would be willing to do it for him. Moreover, he also paid for the 200,000 yuan security guard for Jiang Hai, so Jiang Hai couldn't say anything about it. Even though he wasn't a good person, he wasn't a bad person either. A middle-aged man in his 50s acted like a grandson in front of him, giving him promises and money in exchange for his forgiveness. Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. What's more, in the end he was the one who benefited. Recalling Roland Salad's appearance yesterday, Jiang Hai was naturally very magnanimous to forgive them. As the male lead, Jiang Hai naturally had to have a certain amount of magnanimity. Cough, although it felt fake no matter how he said it. 3 days later, the judges hidden in the crowd reported the results of the competition to their superiors. The organizers were transparent about this. Although they didn't know who the judges were, the top 64 steeds were posted on their website. Jiang Hai's 3 steeds were all on the list. Soaring Dragon number 1, Soaring Dragon number 2, and Soaring Dragon number 3 were ranked 17th, 25th, and 31st, respectively. All of them had entered the competition. Jiang Hai's steeds weren't ranked high because they were the most common Angus steeds, which were very common in the United States. Angus steeds were small and medium-sized breeds. At least in terms of appearance, they weren't as beautiful as the average Wagyu steeds. Plus, it was the first day, so Jiang Hai's stakes weren't ranked low, but they weren't ranked high either. After the 3rd day, early in the morning of the 4th day, the competition venue was no longer in the exhibition hall. Instead, it was in the big exhibition hall of the beef cattle exhibition. There, Jiang Hai's 3 cows were placed together with the other cows in the top 64 for close comparison. This was also very cruel. When people looked at cows, they would judge them based on their own impressions. But now Jiang Hai's cow was really different. His cow was very docile, not violent, and not frightened. But when other cows saw Jiang Hai's cow, they would subconsciously retreat. This was because they felt the pressure from Jiang Hai's cow. Jiang Hai's cow was very strong. His cow was very gentle, it was not violent, and it would not be frightened. That soft fur was different in comparison. Those eyes that were full of spirituality were also different in comparison. After entering the big exhibition hall, Jiang Hai's steeds instantly became the star of the exhibition hall. Naturally, a large number of people gathered here to observe Jiang Hai's steeds. There were judges from the organizer, merchants who wanted to buy steeds, and even some people from companies. They were also very interested in Jiang Hai's steeds. It would be good to buy such a good steed. Some other people looked at Jiang Hai's steeds helplessly, especially the Cartwright Company, which had a grudge against Jiang Hai. This time, they came to participate in the National Beef Cattle Exhibition. They were lucky to catch the last bus. One of their steeds was in the top 60. After all, in the United States, there was a big gap between the animal husbandry standards of the East and the West. It was good enough that they could enter the top 64 while representing the states in the Northeast. However, Jiang Hai's steeds really made them have no hope of catching up. The Fat Dragon Manor over there is in Winthrop. Isn't that your territory? Looking at Jiang Hai's 3 cattle seats in the distance, there were a lot of people crowded in front of them. Far away at the tail of the Cartwright Company there was no one there. Rosalind Cartwright, who had a conflict with Jiang Hai, was sitting on a chair at this time. Looking at the crowd on Jiang Hai's side, he heard a voice. "Oh, it's you. They have a good way to raise steeds. We can't do anything about it." Rosalind Cartwright raised his head and looked at the person who spoke. He shrugged lightly and said indifferently, "Yes, since they lost last time they had given up. At least in the matter of raising steeds, they had no way to compete with Jiang Hai. But fortunately, no matter how strong Jiang Hai was, he only represented his ranch. He occupied the high-end steakhouse near New York, but he disdained to occupy the intermediate and low-level markets. Therefore, although the Cartwright Company suffered a lot of losses, it was still profitable overall. It was just that the gap between the two was getting bigger and bigger. Last year at the New York Beef Show, when they saw that Jiang Hai's steeds were so popular, they still wanted to compete. But now they had completely given up. Giving up so easily isn't the Rosalind Cartwright I know. Looking at the resigned Rosalind Cartwright in front of him, the man took a chair and sat beside him, looking at Jiang Hai and his steeds in the distance. Upon hearing his words, Rosalind Carlyle couldn't help but mock himself. Give up? If it was so easy to give up, he wouldn't say anything. But now the reality was that it was impossible to not give up, because Jiang Hai's strength was beyond their understanding. Chapter 699. Do you know anything about Jiang Hai and his Soaring Dragon Manor? Rosalind Cartwright couldn't help but ask the man next to him. Oh, I don't know much about it. Hearing his words, the man froze for a moment, then smiled and said, Since you don't know, I'll give you an introduction. You just asked me why I should accept my fate? What can I do if I don't accept my fate? Let me tell you, all of his cows have a full slaughter rate, and the proportion of the beef that is slaughtered is as high as 20%. In other words, for a cow that is more than 700 kilograms, he can slaughter about 500 kilograms of meat, and among the meat, the special grade is as high as 100 kilograms. What can you not give up? Rosalind Cartwright looked at Jiang Hai in the distance and said with a bitter face, 20% of the special grade meat production rate? How can people live? Is there any way to have fun? 20%? Ah, that's really scary. However, you are the local tyrants of those states. Have you ever thought about controlling 20% of the technology in your own hands? Gazing at Rosalind Cartwright's hopeless expression, the man said with a smile. Upon hearing his words, Rosalind Cartwright couldn't help but let out a self-deprecating laugh. How could they not have thought about this? The big fish ate the small fish and the small fish ate the shrimps. Such a law of survival was natural, and it was also natural in the American business world. After they lost to Jiang Hai, they thought about this idea. They had sent people to contact Jiang Hai's people openly and secretly, wanting to know the secret of Jiang Hai's cows. However, Jiang Hai was quite good to his cowboys. He had a good relationship with them and he gave them a lot of money. Naturally, no one would betray him. Not to mention the trust between people, just the money they gave was definitely not enough to move them. Their annual salary in Jiang Hai's manor was $20,000 to $30,000. This was indeed not much, but the annual bonus was as high as more than $1 million. With an annual income of nearly $2 million, how could they betray Jiang Hai? One had to know that this was only 1 year. In 10 years it would be 20 million. In 20 years it would be 40 million. Of course they still had to pay taxes. However, with this amount of money, ordinary bribes didn't exist here. Therefore, the Cartwright company was given the cold shoulder at the beginning. Later, when Jiang Hai contacted the Walmart group, he did not dare to touch him. As for now, Jiang Hai didn't just rely on the Walmart group. He also had a lot of power himself. The Cartwright company had no chance. Fortunately, Jiang Hai only occupied the top market. He wasn't interested in the middle and lower market. Otherwise they would be in trouble. I don't know what you're thinking. I'll just pretend that you didn't say that to me today. It's impossible for us to deal with Jiang Hai, let alone be used by others. We're convinced by Jiang Hai's strength. It's that simple. Looking at the man in front of him, Rosalind Cartwright said with a serious face. He had met Jiang Hai. Otherwise he would still have some ability. At least he was very clear about the purpose of this guy's visit. The bird that sticks out gets shot. Of course, if the bird that sticks out gets enough benefits, it wouldn't matter. However, if he knew that he couldn't get any benefits, he would still stick out. He wasn't stupid. Oh, that's a pity. Hearing Rosalind Cartwright admit defeat, the man shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Then he left with a smile and went to his exhibition hall. Yes, this man was also one of the exhibitors of today's livestock exhibition. This man's manor was also in Texas. However, unlike ordinary Texas ranches, he raised Wagyu cattle here. Wagyu cattle were the exclusive beef cattle of Japan. In fact, many countries around the world raised Wagyu cattle, because Wagyu cattle were also divided into different grades. In Japan, Wagyu cattle were divided into many kinds according to different regions. There were Xinjiang cattle, Kobe cattle, Danma cattle, Songban cattle, Feiho cattle, Miyazaki cattle, Saga cattle, and Misawa cattle. Among them, the most famous were Danma cattle and Songu cattle. Danma cattle were originally draft cattle. However, in 1898, the Japanese government improved from draft cattle to beef cattle. They became the ancestors of the three major Japanese Wagyu cattle, Songu cattle, Kobe cattle, and Miyazaki cattle. However, the latter two were actually not that high in grade. Generally, if people in Europe and America wanted to raise Wagyu cattle, they would import cattle from Japan, which was the latter two. The real Songu cattle couldn't be exported from Japan. The real Songu cattle were the most expensive type of cattle. At first, Songu cattle referred to the cattle raised in Mekong County, Japan. Later, it became the standard of beef cattle. Until now, it was a kind of beef cattle's grade and a way to raise them. The beef cattle in Japan were divided into 15 grades. Only the top 2 grades were called Songu cattle. Danma cattle were bought back and transported to an area in the center of Songu in the south of Yunchuan and north of Miyazaki in Mekong County for 3 years when they were 8 to 9 months old. Unmated cows would be sent to the market for grading and auction when they reached the standard weight. Therefore, this kind of cattle was more of a symbol, not a live cattle that could be bought by outsiders. But this person was different. The cattle he used this time was a Matsusaka cattle, and it looked quite good. Although it was a castrated bull, it was a good choice in terms of size and appearance. There must be a lot of onlookers. From this point of view, It was obvious that this person had a very close relationship with Japan. How is it going? Looking at this person walking back, a yellow man walked over from the tourists near his booth and asked this person in strange English. Matsui-kun, the situation seems to be a bit bad. There are very few people here who dare to fight with that person. Hearing the yellow man's words, the white man here glanced at Jiang Hai from afar, then said slowly. It seemed that he had found a lot of people, but the situation wasn't too good. It's understandable. Yesterday, Luke Shan made it clear that he was on Jiang Hai's side. The cowboys and ranchers in Texas naturally don't dare to fight against Jiang Hai. The cowboys and ranchers in Montana have no interest in Jiang Hai. Although they are very curious about that technology, they are too far away. Even if there are benefits, they can't get it. In the end, the Starlit company, which has the best chance to get that technology, has now admitted defeat. They really have no other way. Think of a way. Our country is quite interested in its technology. It doesn't need to be carefully raised to reach 20% top-grade beef. Our country is determined to get it. Also, we are quite interested in the cultivation method of that grass. As long as you can find a way to get it done, you can have as much Matsusaka beef as you want. Looking at the person in front of him, the Japanese man said with a smile. Yes, I will study it. Hearing the Japanese man's words, the white man also chuckled with a smile on his face. But he has other thoughts in his mind. If he really gets Jiang Hai's method of cultivating beef cattle and grass, will he give it to the Japanese? What a joke. At that time he will be the next Jiang Hai and he will do better than Jiang Hai. He will become the king of beef cattle in this world. He has to admit that although Jiang Hai is strong enough, he doesn't have enough ambition. He is too casual. At this time, Jiang Hai doesn't know that he has been targeted by a thief. At this time he is taking care of his cows. In this way the fourth day of the exhibition ended quickly. After the comparison and demonstration, Jiang Hai's steak reputation was indeed somewhat unshakable. Especially the booths on both sides of him, they were about to curse. Without comparison there would be no harm. Now they were very hurt. On the evening of the fourth day, a new round of rankings was updated. Out of the 64, only 32 were left. On the fifth day 16 would advance to 16. On the sixth day 16 would advance to 8. On the last day the final 8 would decide the king of beef. This time the Texas Livestock Exhibition has a total of 4 awards. 1 gold award, 2 silver awards, 4 bronze awards, and the appearance award. Apart from the appearance award, which was not very reliable, it was probably prepared for the big companies that didn't win any awards. A total of 8 cows could win an award. In other words, if they entered the final day they would basically be guaranteed a bronze award. There was only an eighth of a chance. After the fourth day of the exhibition ended, the rankings of Jiang Hai's 3 cows rose again. This time Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon 2 ranked the highest 5th, Soaring Dragon 1 ranked the 8th, and Soaring Dragon 3 ranked the 11th. It has to be admitted that in terms of size, the Angus cows were indeed at a disadvantage. Looking at the Charolais cows, Limousin cows and other large breeds of cattle, one of them could grow to 1.5 tons. For example, the Simmental cows and Hayford cows could grow to more than 1 ton. Even the Wagyu cows could grow to about 1 ton. Compared to these cows, the Angus cows were indeed not at an advantage in terms of size. The maximum weight of 750 kilograms made the Angus cows look like little chicks among these big cows. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai's steak was not so famous. If possible, Jiang Hai wanted to raise some large beef cows. However, if he wanted to raise large beef cows, he would have to sell all the cows in the manor. Jiang Hai was reluctant to do so. Speaking of which, when Robbins Garcia first said that he wanted to raise Angus cows, Jiang Hai did not understand. If he did, he could have raised something else. Come to think of it, he could not finish the pasture in his manor anyway. If he had raised Limousin cows back then he would have. A bull could grow to 1.5 tons. With a slaughter rate of 65%, it would be 975 kilograms of meat. If 20% of it was premium grade beef, it would be 195 kilograms. If 1 kilogram sold for $700, the meat alone would be worth $136,500. Of course, this was all in hindsight. Moreover, Jiang Hai did not know that his aura oh no blood had such a great improvement effect on beef cows. Of course, if he had wanted to buy Limousin cows back then, Robbins Garcia and the others would not have agreed. This was because the taste of this kind of cow was actually not very good. Although it grew quickly and could grow to more than 800 kilograms in 12 months, the problem was also very serious. This cow grew quickly and had a lot of muscle but little fat. What did marbling mean? It was fat. High-grade beef would grow with less fat. This kind of cow could only be killed from an 8-month-old calf to produce marbled beef. However, an 8-month-old calf was actually about the same as an Angus cow. That was what Robbins Garcia thought back then. Of course, Jiang Hai himself did not particularly care about this. It was not that he had a problem with money, nor was he a saint. It was just that he liked Angus cows. This kind of cow was very quiet and not irritable. It was indeed very suitable for raising. If he raised other large cows, he would need more cowboys than just Robbins Garcia and the others. He would need at least 5 times more cowboys to take care of them. There were too many people, and if something troublesome happened, it would be even more annoying. After easily entering the top 32 on the 5th day, Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor could be considered to have opened up some reputation. On the 5th day of the exhibition, there were even some people who asked about the Soaring Dragon Manor's beef. After learning that it was exclusively for Walmart and Haishang supermarkets, it was not difficult for people to associate it with the special grade beef that these 2 supermarkets were still selling. It seemed that this beef should be from Jiang Hai's hands. Immediately, many people came over to hand over their business cards and exchange phone numbers. On the 5th day, Jiang Hai's place was even more lively than on the 4th day. Perhaps it was because of his reputation, but at the end of the 5th day when the scores were announced, Jiang Hai's 3 cows were once again promoted to a higher level. The first place Soaring Dragon number 2 had risen to the 3rd place, becoming a seeded contestant. Soaring Dragon number 1 replaced Soaring Dragon number 2 in the 5th place, while Soaring Dragon number 3 moved to the 7th place. The 3 cows entered the top 16 together. And this ranking was the same on the 6th day. It didn't change. At least until the last day of the show, no matter how good the Angus beef was, there was no way it could challenge the top 2 positions. In the end, after the 6th day of the show, Jiang Hai's 3 beef cows all entered the final 8. The final rankings were 3rd, 5th, and 7th. In addition to his 3 cows, there were 5 other cows. Among them, 3 from Texas and 2 from Montana had made it to the finals. All the cows from other regions had been eliminated. Of course, because this was the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, it did not accept registrations from other regions and companies. Therefore, companies from Australia and Japan, which were also big cattle farmers, did not participate. These 8 cows could be said to be in the top 8 in the United States. Chapter 700. Tomorrow is the finals. Are you nervous? Prawalton let Jiang Hai's head rest on her chest as she pressed Jiang Hai's shoulder and whispered. These days Jiang Hai was really busy. Of course, this so-called busy was not physically busy but mentally busy. Every day, too many people came to Jiang Hai to ask if he sold his beef cattle or if Jiang Hai's technology was for sale. Jiang Hai was annoyed to death listening to them, but after all, he was still participating in the exhibition. Jiang Hai could not lose his temper. He could only say over and over again that he was not for sale. After hearing this, the other party's reaction was different. Some of them were more particular. When they heard that Jiang Hai was not for sale, they left directly, but some people were not so particular. No matter which country, there would be some arrogant bastards. So some people began to threaten Jiang Hai by saying that they were from some company. They asked Jiang Hai to be more careful, or they pretended to be pitiful and asked Jiang Hai to give them some shares. Otherwise, they would lose their jobs when they go back. For these people who threatened him, he directly asked the security to throw them away. As for those who pretended to be pitiful, he directly drove them away and ignored them. Jiang Hai only came to win the award. He did not intend to sell these cattle. Because of this, Jiang Hai also offended a lot of people these days. However, from the beginning Jiang Hai's goal was these low-end businessmen, so he did not care about offending them. I'm not nervous, but I'm a little excited. Let's get it done quickly. After that, I can go back and rest for a few days. Prawalton turned his head and gently rubbed Prawalton's plump body. His hair made Jiang Hai itchy. She couldn't help but pat him and then glanced at him. Feeling Prawalton's action, Jiang Hai also smiled, but when he was smiling, he suddenly took a deep breath. Did I hurt you? Sensing Jiang Hai's movements, Cheryl Li, who was currently lying between Jiang Hai's legs and nibbling with her upper body, couldn't help but stop. After spitting out something that shouldn't be described, she looked at Jiang Hai worriedly. It's okay, it's very comfortable. Looking at Cheryl Li's gaze, Jiang Hai said with a chuckle. That's good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Li lowered her head once again and began to busy herself with her work. Time really flies. Tomorrow is the finals and then we have to go back the day after. After we go back, we have to go to the company and start working. There are still 2 days to spend time with you. Looking at Jiang Hai in her arms, Prawalton suddenly felt a little reluctant. She had been with Jiang Hai for so long. To be honest, she didn't know what kind of feelings she had for Jiang Hai. She didn't understand Jiang Hai's feelings for her, but her desire to stay with Jiang Hai was getting stronger day by day. But every time this thought popped up, she would suppress it because she knew that it was impossible for her and Jiang Hai to be together. As long as you want, you can live in my villa at any time. Your room will always be there. Listening to Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai also looked at her. Jiang Hai didn't know how he felt about this woman, but if she wanted to come, Jiang Hai would definitely welcome her. Forget it. I don't want to be tied to a tree like you. You have to know that I still have a big family to feed. Hee, and those little girlfriends of yours, won't they kill me when the time comes? Chili finally left and I'm going again. Well, let's not talk about these sad topics. Let's cherish the remaining 2 days. Prawalton glanced at Jiang Hai and said in a relaxed manner. Then she kissed Jiang Hai's lips. The fire of war unknowingly ignited in the room again. The night was silent. The next morning, Jiang Hai and the others had already gone to the cowshed and took the 3 finalists to the slaughterhouse. Beef competitions were different from bullfighting competitions and dogfighting competitions. Speaking of which, it was a bit cruel. It was a beef competition. What were they competing for? Meat. If they didn't kill the cattle, they would never know how good the meat was. So in all beef cattle competitions except for bullfighting, they had to kill the cattle to see how good the meat was. Jiang Hai's cattle was naturally the same. Fortunately, he was already mentally prepared, so he didn't feel sad. Early in the morning, which was probably around 5 o'clock, Jiang Hai and the others took the 3 cattle to the designated slaughterhouse. They watched the butchers kill the cattle, peel the skin and remove the internal organs. As for the meat removal process, they had to wait until they were on the stage. They had already experienced this once at the New York Beef Cattle Show. However, when they were skinning the cattle, the butchers couldn't help but sigh. The skin of Jiang Hai's cattle was really amazing. So the butcher deliberately came out and told Jiang Hai that he bought the 3 skins for $3,000. Jiang Hai didn't bargain. He had no use for the 3 skins, so he sold them to the butcher. With the 3 skins, the butcher watched the butchers kill the cattle more carefully. Before 8 o'clock in the morning, the 3 cattle were skinned and their internal organs were cleaned, but the cattle were still whole. After they were processed, they were sent to the exhibition. At this time, the exhibition had been turned into a large stage to display every slaughtered cow. According to the order, the first one to go up was the 8th cow. This cow came from Montana and was called the Hall Livestock Company. It was said to be a first-class livestock company in Montana, but it was only in the middle of the first class. It wasn't the best. Montana and Texas were like 2 opposing forces. The Montana Cowboys looked down on the Texas Cowboys, and the Texas Cowboys looked down on the Montana Cowboys. Therefore, even if the 2 countries held a national competition, the top companies on both sides wouldn't participate. Only the mid-tier companies would participate. But even so, Montana had 2 nominees, which showed that they were quite strong. Montana is one of the 2 most developed areas in the United States in terms of animal husbandry. It's really good, but I don't think there's much hope for this cow. At the side of the screen, Robbins Garcia and Jiang Hai stood together. Looking at the cow on stage, he couldn't help but whisper. This cow looks good, but I don't know why, but it feels weird. Looking at the cow being carried on stage, Jiang Hai also said to Robbins Garcia. Although he wasn't very proficient in raising cows, at least he had trained his eyesight a little. This is a Charolais cow. Can be said to be a textbook Charolais cow. Its bones are strong, its limbs are strong, its head is small and wide, its horns are long and round, its neck is short and thick, its chest is wide and deep, its ribs are square and round, and its back is wide and thick. But there's a problem. Charolais cows are originally cows with more lean meat, so the meat of this cow won't be too bad, but it's still very difficult to kill a large amount of premium-grade beef. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia also spoke seriously. While he was speaking, the host on the stage was also speaking. What he said was almost the same as what he said. Of course, he didn't say the last sentence. After all, before the cow was solved, the host couldn't interfere too much. A few big men went on stage with meat-carving knives and began to cut the Charolais cow. One has to admit that the people hired by the organizer are all good. It didn't take long for the cow on the stage to be almost finished. At the same time, there were also appraisers who came to check the meat. After about half an hour, the cow was completely cut open. The host also reported the situation of this Charolais cow. The net weight of this Charolais cow was 1,200 kilograms, and the total weight of the meat after slaughter was 816 kilograms. The slaughter rate was 68%, which was quite good. The premium grade beef was 16 kilograms, which was 2%. The special grade beef was 220 kilograms, which was 27%. The preferred grade beef was 351 kilograms, which was 43%. The standard grade beef was 135 kilograms, which was 16%. The commercial grade beef was 41 kilograms, which was 5%. The other 4% was usable grade beef, and the 3% was minced grade beef, which was not included in the calculation. Jiang Hai listened to the host's price and calculated in his heart. The premium grade beef was $700 per kilogram, which was $11,200. The special grade beef was $250 per kilogram, which was $55,000. The preferred grade beef was $100 per kilogram, which was $35,100. The standard grade beef was $19.57, $5. The commercial grade beef was $10 per kilogram, which was $410. The rest were not included. The total value of this cow was $103,667, $5. As expected of a cow that could enter the top 8 in the United States. The last one was worth $100,000. If such a cow was placed on other ranches, it would definitely be a breeding cow or a king cow. However, in a top ranch it was far inferior. However, the fact that a cow could be sold for $100,000 still caused the audience to exclaim. Indeed, these top beef cows were too valuable. Of course, Jiang Hai was not worried about this. Not to mention that this cow was nearly 500 kilograms heavier than his cow. Jiang Hai did not care much about the slaughter rate. His goal was only the gold medal. It's our turn. After the announcement, this cow was pushed down. Next was Jiang Hai's cow, which was in 7th place. After saying that, Robbins Garcia went over to help Burke Dollar and the staff push the cow up. However, as soon as the bull came up, it could be seen that it was much smaller than the Charolais bull from before. This cow is called Soaring Dragon number 3. It comes from Winthrop's Soaring Dragon Manor. The Soaring Dragon Manor is the dark horse of this year's beef show. Even with the capabilities of their manor, they were able to produce 3 beef cows. It seems like they have secured at least 2 awards. The host couldn't help but sigh when he saw the cow being pushed onto the stage. Originally, this competition was supposed to be a match between Texas and Montana. However, now Jiang Hai felt that Texas and Montana were similar. Now he wanted to see how good the quality of his cow was. This is an Angus cow. When it was alive, it weighed 760 kilograms. Wow, it is considered a big one among Angus cows. Let's see how strong it is. As soon as the host finished speaking, a professional butcher stepped forward and started to cut the cow. However, as soon as the first cut was made, the pink beef was flipped out. The white marble-like fat in the middle of the pink beef was perfectly arranged in front of everyone. Superior grade beef on the first cut? Looking at the perfect beef, many people below the stage exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, more people had greedy looks in their eyes. The butcher on the stage was stunned for a moment, but he still started to cut the cow quickly. With each cut, the audience below would exclaim in surprise. It was really frightening. Jiang Hai and the others had seen this kind of occasion before, but they were still very happy to see their surprised expressions. This feeling of vanity really made them a little complacent. Because the beef was relatively small, it only took about 20 minutes to cut it out. The appraiser also walked up to the stage and looked at the beef with a surprised face. Then he weighed the beef. Cough, to be honest, I have never seen such a cow in all my years of hosting animal husbandry exhibitions. It is really terrifying. Now, let me publicize the results of these beef. This Angus cow Soaring Dragon number 3 weighs 760 kilograms and produces 512 kilograms of meat. It has a slaughter rate of 67%, which has already surpassed the Angus cow. Among them, the superior grade beef, hiss. At this point, the host couldn't help but take a deep breath. It was really too terrifying. 118 kilograms, accounting for 23% of the meat yield. Oh my god. Superior grade beef, 312 kilograms, accounting for 61% of all the beef. These 2 grades of beef alone account for 84% of all the meat yield. That's terrifying. Superior grade beef, 51 kilograms, accounting for 10%. Standard grade beef, 11 kilograms, accounting for 2%. Commercial grade beef, 5 kilograms, accounting for 1%. The remaining 3% are usable and minced. This beef is really terrifying. Listening to the host's report, the people below the stage were also calculating. 118 kilograms of superior grade beef was $82,600, and 312 kilograms of superior grade beef was $78,000. These two grades alone were worth $160,000. The rest was just a small amount of money. Jiang Hai secretly nodded at these figures. Of course, not all of the beef in his manor were like this. These three were specially strengthened by Jiang Hai before he came here. But even so, according to this price, the rest of the beef in his manor could be sold for more than 140,000 gold coins without a problem. And this time, after making a name for himself, according to Prawalton, she could buy Jiang Hai's beef for $860 per kilogram. In this way, Jiang Hai's income would increase again. This was the effect of branding. At this time, the audience below the stage, after calculating the income of this cow, looked at the cow and Jiang Hai with some red eyes. Before this, they also knew that this beef was worth a lot, but they didn't think that this beef would be worth so much. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.